Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's live discussion video where we talk about a show that started airing, almost 15 years ago. I am joined here by Darrin from D's Reviews, and we're here to talk about Lost. Darrin, thanks so much for joining.
Hey, as always, thank you for having me, Mark. Really a blast. Was looking forward to this and really enjoyed kind of jumping back into this series. Was so kind of groundbreaking and grabbed audiences so much when it first came out. It was fun to get to jump back into there and do a good rewatch.
Yeah, so for those who are familiar with my channel at the moment, I am doing a current rewatch review where I'm going through Lost and I'm reviewing the episodes, the season's 8 episodes at a time, so I do it in chunks. And so I just finished my coverage of the first 2 seasons, so I thought it'd be cool to get Darrin on board and talk about just the first 2 seasons of Lost, season 1 and season 2, and we will try to keep this discussion spoiler-free from spoilers beyond season 2, because I know probably most of us have seen the show already all the way to the end, but I know there's a few people out there who are watching along with me who haven't seen past season 2 yet, so we're going to try to keep it free of those kind of spoilers. But at the very end of the video, we might get together and just talk about some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the show by then, you can sort of leave for that last bit. But yeah, so anyway, just had to do this discussion video because the island told me to. It was Anyway, let's go ahead. So the idea here is we're going to try to go through every single episode of the first 2 seasons, which is a daunting task to do it within 2 hours. So I'm actually going to set a timer and give us only 2 minutes to talk about each episode, so we can try to get through this in a timely fashion. I mean, if we really have a robust discussion and have something to say, then maybe we'll go a bit past the timer. And some episodes we might not have as much to say about. But anyway, yeah, this might change the format of it, but trying to keep it a bit succinct. So Darrin, let's start with your overall thoughts of just season 1, of rewatching season 1, how you feel about season 1 of the show.
I really enjoyed it. I mean, we'll talk a bit more about the pilot episode shortly, but I think just in general, it was such a grabbing show because it really did. It gave us a new way of looking at things, both with the current time and having all of those flashback sequences to sort of develop each of the individual characters. Plus, we had such a great mystery with the island and shooting it out in Kauai and Hawaii, just such a beautiful location. It was one of those, especially again on an initial watch, really kind of grabbed our attention. And rewatching, I really enjoyed how they were slowly setting things up and sort of getting little ideas and the mystery and keeping the audience really on its foot, especially for the first half of the first season, where it was just sort of a constant catch up of, oh my God, what is going to come next? So really, I think they did a great job of season 1.
Yeah, for me, season 1 is probably one of, I think, the better seasons of the show, but it's not my favorite. I think season 1 does have a lot of more of a mainstream sort of feel to it. It's got the musical montages, and it's a bit more sort of character focused, which some people like, and I kind of like that, but then I think the show gets better and future seasons where they get more into the sort of mythology side of things. In fact, when I was first watching season 1, I was almost saw as a guilty pleasure because it reminded me a bit of some of these mainstream shows with their like musical montages and soap opera type things. So I still think it's a strong season, but I think maybe it could have been a bit better.
Well, I think part of that's also is setting up the island. As the show went on, they were able to get a firmer vision on where they were going. Especially hearing tales later on of just so much they were sort of creating things on the fly. First off, I think those elements show, but they kept it going.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So let's go ahead and jump into the episodes. Let's start with the pilot episode. Yeah, so Darrin, why don't you start us off with your thoughts on the pilot episode, which is a 2-parter?
Yeah, this is really, I think, J.J. Abrams in his strong suit, setting things up, giving us a mystery. Especially the first 10, 15 minutes, I think, is some of the finest television in many ways that we have seen, because there's very little dialogue. Everything is very visually set up. I mean, starting things just with Jack waking up in the middle of the jungle. Then you see a shoe hanging from a branch, and then running out and seeing the plane crash. It's just, and at each point we have characters that are introduced without a whole lot of dialogue. We get to see who they are based on how they're acting and how they're responding to things. So much instead of just backstory saying, "Hi, I'm this guy and I do these things." So I really, it's that the whole setup, I think, was so strong, really, in just giving us such a great visual introduction. It sucked you in immediately and you wanted to learn more.
Now, I think we might disagree a little bit on the pilot episode, because I do really like the pilot episode. I do, and when some people say it's the best or one of the best pilot episodes of any show, I can agree with that, because I'm not generally a fan of pilot episodes in general, because generally it's just testing the waters and they really haven't found their footing, and they're just trying to establish their best foot forward. And I do think this is probably one of the best attempts at doing that. But when I look at the show with this episode in the context of the whole show, this is not one of my favorite episodes, especially when I watch future seasons and I go back and watch this episode again. It seems a bit, I don't know. You like how there's minimum dialogue, but to me, it seems like it drags a bit, and they sort of take too long to get things going. And they haven't found some of the character connections yet. Like, we get a lot of Boone and Shannon scenes that are a bit waste of time. So I think this is definitely, like, that plane crash sequence is like amazing, particularly like the flashback with Kate where you see the plane like disappear behind her. Like, that was stunning as hell. So I definitely give it credit for that. But I think overall, as a whole, is a definitely good, strong start to the series. But I'm not sure if I'd say it's like one of the best episodes of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would agree with that. But I think, like I said, it's those first few minutes to introduce a story, especially, as you said, since pilots usually are sort of a testing waters, and usually they have to sort of really tweak and adjust things, which obviously they did. But I think for a setup, again, especially those first 10, 15 minutes, I think did an amazing job. And yeah, it does start to drag a little bit, but they, I can get, it's a pilot. They're finding their storytelling. But it's also J.J. Abrams going, mystery! And you guys go take care of the rest of this. I'm just giving you ideas.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree that it was just putting their strongest foot forward, and this is what really launched this show. I mean, there was a lot of talk about the polar bear scene being a bit cheesy and looking a bit outdated watching it now. But I didn't think it was too bad, because you weren't focused that much on the visuals effects. You were focused more on the character reactions.
Yeah, it was the mystery, and I think that's what they accomplished well in the first episode. Is they let us know this is a strange place with strange things going on. It's, you are lost, effectively.
Yeah, and I like the way that there was more of the background setting. Like, the setting as I said, season 1 in general was more on the characters, and so it was like almost like your stereotypical disaster story where you have these different walks of all people of all different walks of life. But I think that it surpassed that because it made these characters more interesting, and plus all the mysteries just added to that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let's go ahead then and move on to, this is a bit hard doing the speed talking, but let's go ahead and move on to the next episode, which is, Tabula Rasa. I believe it's pronounced. This is the Kate-centric episode, where we get her backstory. And to me, this is kind of like a middling episode. This is more of establishing the characters in the camp. And I don't think it does a particularly good job at setting up Kate, more just saying, oh, she's a fugitive, and that's about it. What are some of your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think this is where you can really, you start to see where they're playing with ideas, but haven't fully formulated many of them. Because I think they do it feels like they do some back and forth with Kate's character here and then in some of the following coming up episodes of trying to figure out, is she all bad? How is she doing? What is her relationship with this Marshall? I mean, they try to keep it open, but it feels like later on they start doing little tweaks and adjustments of trying to make how sympathetic do we want to make this character, how dangerous do we want to imply this character. So I feel like they're sitting that up, but yeah, like you said, I think even the next few episodes generally are have that feel of like we're trying to get character work going on without really furthering the larger mystery.
Yeah, and this was the first episode where they start the whole flashback format. I mean, we got a few flashbacks in the pilot, and I think this was made like months after the pilot too. So this is first when they decided that we're going to focus on a different character every time. So I think you can definitely tell they're first testing the waters with that, because the flashback maybe isn't as strong as it could have been. Like, I think they could have fleshed out her relationship to the Australian farmer better, and why it is that she saved his life, other than she's a good person.
Right. Well, that's exactly what I mean. It's like, they're trying to make it dangerous to Marshall, but they're trying to make her sympathetic with this relationship, but they don't, you're right, they don't spend time, they don't really spend a proper focus on it. But again, it is first season, and it's always, first seasons are always finding footing.
Definitely. Cool. All right. Let's go ahead then and move on to the next episode, which is Walkabout, which is seen as one of the best episodes of the show. And again, like, I think that's because of the Locke flashbacks. It's not beat around the bush here. This is the big revelation. In fact, I think this is the episode, not the pilot, that first got me hooked on the show, that got me to realize that this show is something special and something amazing. And because that reveal at the very end of the episode, where we find out that he was this hunter who's going out and being all, Rambo-y type, is actually this pathetic guy who's in a wheelchair before he came to the island, and the island changed him. But I'm not sure if I'd say it was one of the best episodes of the series, because the bulk of the episode is kind of boring and just dealing with, they're going to burn the fuselage and going on a boar hunt and stuff like that. I don't think the ending is really the strength of it.
Right. And they do spend a lot of time very specifically setting up for that reveal at the end with Locke, because you always see him sitting and he's always talking about he's the general or the captain there. He's playing the lunchtime games with his work buddy, and then he's planning his big trip. It's like you could almost tell they're really working hard to get you that big reveal. However, you're right, it does work. I mean, we had ended the pilot with the line to Walt, "Do you want to know a secret?" And here we get to see what that secret is. And you're right, it's like suddenly the island mystery really deepens. And I think that's mythology was good setting up here.
I mean, would you agree that ending there was one of the better moments of the entire show?
Oh yeah, it's perfect because you, like I said, they spend time to build this up, but you buy into it. So when they do that last reveal and pull away, and he's like, "Don't tell me what I can't do," and he's stuck inside this wheelchair. It's like, oh my God, what? How? Hey, explains the wheelchair that we saw in the first season that they had put Claire in, I think. Yeah, so it was. Yeah, you're right. It was a very effective reveal, and again, I think it really heightened the mythology that was developing of the island.
Absolutely. And hello, X-Men in the chat. Good to see you. Anyway, let's go ahead and move over to the next episode, which is White Rabbit. Now, this is a strange episode because I think this is an episode I actually like better watching in retrospect after seeing some of the future episodes with Jack and his father. And I actually find it more powerful, more touching after watching those other episodes, because you already know Jack and his father, the type of strained relationship they had and the issues that they had. So I think that this episode actually would have been stronger if you already knew who his father was and what the relationship was. I think the first time I saw it, I wasn't that interested. It just seemed like, he's going off in the jungle to chase the image of his father, and he finds his coffee and starts crying. I don't know. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I can't really disagree with that. Again, I think this is sort of playing with the relationships and then what they want to have. And yeah, the classic chasing a ghost across the island. Is it real? Is it not real? Are we hallucinating? You get those sort of questions. And as we've seen this mysterious island, it doesn't seem out of place, particularly. But it does start to ask questions: is what is going on? And I think they do spend a good time in the first season implying a lot of possibilities of what the island is and letting us as the audience wonder, is this true or is this not true?
Well, it's also a big step forward for the character camp because we get the epic live together, die alone speech, which will be referenced several times throughout, which
Yeah.
I think it was a good speech. I don't think I realized, how much they were going to reference it later on. But I think it does. So it's the moment where the survivors start to realize that they're can't just sit around and wait for rescue, that they actually need to form a community.
Right. Well, that's it. You're starting to get the vision of we're going to be here for a while. We've got to figure out. I think with the first few episodes, it's kind of like we just got to survive till the search party arrives. And now they start with well, that might be a little while. We still need to find a way to live while we're here.
Cool. All right, cool. Let's move over to the next episode, which is House of the Rising Sun. So I'm not sure if I have a lot to say about it. This is when they get more into Sun and Jin. It was interesting having main characters who don't speak English. In the show, of course, we'll find out in this episode that Sun actually speaks English, as she was hiding it. I think the backstory, the love story between Jin and Sun was actually really powerful. I think so. I think the flashbacks are the strength of this episode. But the on-island storyline is just when they go to the caves and Jack wants to convince everyone to go to the caves. It's hard for me to like that storyline in retrospect because they leave the caves at the end of season 1, don't really care about them anymore. But I guess it was a good way to set up the characters. I don't know. What do you think of that?
I'm a big fan of Jin and Sun. I really like their relationship. I like how it evolves. And we'll hit it on when we come back, but I like these scenes in context with what they do with later on with the flashbacks and starting to play with points of view. I think it's really effective. And yeah, otherwise the backstory of just we're going to the caves, it's better. This starts to be a way of separating the group and involving like a lot of walking scenes, which I guess you can't just have people walking around the one camp on the beach. Now they get to walk to and from, and people have to be in one place, and you get danger, and you got to run to the next. But from a survival standpoint, it makes sense. Heck, let's camp out in a place that's covered that has water. Figure everything else out after that. You got to live.
Yeah, it does make sense, but it doesn't make sense why at the end of season 1 they just abandoned the games without
and it's referred to like once or twice afterwards, and that's it. Yeah, I know that. I completely agree on. I think it's one of those ideas where they just decided, nah, maybe this is too much. We've got hatches all over the island at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And I do have to apologize if someone's running a tool outside. There's nothing I can do about it. So I'll just have to put up with that background noise for the time being. Anyway, let's go ahead and move over to the next episode, which is, what is it? The Moth. All right, so this... Well, you go first, Darrin. What's your thought on the Moth?
This is the whole heroine episode. It's, it does set up an interesting relationship between Charlie and Locke, which I think is useful, especially it plays so much. They do a lot of back and forth later. I mean, some effective and some less effective points. But I do kind of like the idea of Locke trying to help Charlie through this. And dealing with the whole, I'll only let you ask me 3 times.
Yeah, that's pretty classic.
It sets up kind of deeper relationships, and also I think heightens that full knowledge of what we have Locke, on the island, just kind of like the perfect island survivor.
Now, I think the Charlie flashbacks are kind of like his quintessential like backstory. In fact, it's almost an issue because after this episode, you don't even need any Charlie flashbacks. So I think all of the Charlie flashbacks we get after this kind of suck because they go through like everything you need to know about his relationship with his brother and how he started doing heroin. So it's almost too good, really.
Yeah, I know. I have to agree. It does. The later flashbacks of Charlie's life does seem kind of like, well, you've already told the story. Now you're just giving us like a little background. You're filling time.
Yes.
And yeah, for this, we get everything we need to know about Charlie, where he started, where he ended up, how that path happened, and it makes him, sympathetic. But since he's going through his detox at the same time, I think that really works. I think this is one where those flashbacks really work well with what's happening in the current line story.
Yeah, and I think the through story of suspense was like a cave in, and that was kind of just throwaway waste of time to try to get through the more of the character story, which season 1 does a lot. I think it actually does kind of work here. But anyway, let's move over to the next episode, which is Confidence Man, which, Darrin, you told me you had a lot to say about this episode.
Yeah. Confidence Man is, especially on a rewatch binge, to me was one of the most hilarious episodes. And not because of the what's covered. This is dark. This is the, Saeed's torturing Sawyer in order to get medications. So in some ways it's very dark, but rewatching it, this is the 9th day. I did a timeline check. This is day 9 of On the Island, and they go full Lord of the Flies. The fact that they never even ask Sawyer if he actually has the medication. They just make assumptions and they push him. And of course, Sawyer they have set up as the kind of person you push him, he's going to push back, whether it's justified or not. He's just not going to be told what to do. So the fact that by day 9 of being on the island, they go straight to torture it's really over the top. And when they finally get to he's like, I don't have it. You never even asked me if I did have it. It's like, oh, that's right. Everybody was just assuming with your character that you must have had this stuff and you just don't want to give it away. So it was one of those really on rewatch. It was like, okay, this is going too far. Now it's 2 months in. This is episode 8. So it's like 2 months into the show. So after 2 months of watching it might seem like they're at this position, but the way they play with time, the fact that it's just over a week of On the Island, and the fact they go over the top, they never ask Sawyer, really is just it's a crazy one to watch on rewatch. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, this I kind of agree with you because this episode for me is one that I like a lot less now than I did. Like the more I watch, the less I like it, and I think it's partially is what you said about the whole going straight to Lord of the Flies all the way there, and the whole situation of, oh, you have the medicine, it's kind of, and they torture him for that. It seemed very contrived, but also the flashbacks, because this is when we get the huge reveal, because at this point we think Sawyer like killed a little kid or whatever, or killed the parents of a little kid, but we find out that he actually is the little kid whose parents were killed because of a con man, which, I mean, I think the reveal was fine, but I think they could have found a better way to do with it. And the flashbacks themselves were kind of pointless. They were kind of just there to fake you out, to make you think that Sawyer was the one who killed the parents, but then you find out that it was at the end. So in retrospect, I mean, the flashbacks do show you like Sawyer's daily routine as a con man, so I guess they serve a purpose in that regard. But I think this whole episode could have been handled better.
Yeah, no, and this is one I think where they've really hit the point where they're trying to figure out what to do with Sawyer. You know, they wanted to be the little like relationship antagonist, but now they're trying to again do the is he light? Is he dark? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Does he have a heart of gold or not? Sawyer was one of those just development wise. I think through the first half, maybe even through the first whole of the season, they seem to be really kind of inconsistent on how they want to play this character. And in fact,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just do it as like, well, we need an antagonist. That's Sawyer's job. But he doesn't have a whole lot behind that until kind of later on, I think, when they finally work out some specifics.
I think they do a somewhat good job of having him be an asshole, but being the outright antagonist like he is here is a bit too much. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on. Just first in the chat, X-Men says, I always wondered why Jack was such a good fighter during the first season. I wonder if fighting was part of Jack's medical training. And that's something I actually wondered throughout the show. And I was hoping when I was first watching the show that they would have a flashback to explain how Jack knows how to use a gun. I mean, I find it kind of funny how he lectures people, oh, have you been trained on firearms? I'm like, but you're a doctor. How do you know how to use a gun? But anyway,
he just went to standard hero school. It teaches fight, guns, all of that stuff. That's what it was. He went to Australia a couple days early to finish up the course and then get his dad's body. That's sort of how that worked.
Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next episode, which is Solitary. Now, this is an episode that I tend to like less than others. I think this is one of my brother's favorite episodes of season 1. I heard other people say this is one of their favorite episodes of season 1. I kind of don't like this episode, and a lot of that admittedly has to do with the fact that I actually watched, when I first watched season 1 for the first time, I watched it out of order. So I saw the end of the season first before I saw this, so I already knew who Rousseau was. So it wasn't that big of a reveal that we finally meet the French chick. I can understand, like, not knowing who she was and seeing her for the first time would be a big revelation. But I think if you look past that, the episode's kind of dull, and it's kind of like, oh, Saeed tortured someone, now he's getting tortured in return. Oh, well, the irony. And it didn't seem like there was good reason for her to torture him either. And of course, a lot of what Rousseau says will be totally inconsistent with what they do in the future, but we won't get too much into that. But this is the episode that first introduced the concept of the others. So I think the episode's good in that regard, but otherwise, I thought it was kind of dull. I don't know. Your opinion is there.
Yeah, I don't really disagree too much with you. It is kind of a straightforward. They're trying to just do some misdirect. We want to expand some of the mythology, and yeah, I think they did get kind of inconsistent with Rousseau's story and, you know, what the transmission and everything, what that was, how that came across. You know, they do a little revisionist history later on. But yeah, the biggest point of this episode is really the reveal of the others, that there are other people living on the island. And especially we get, I think, the first of the whispering kind of indications. I think that's good. Again, it gives us a sort of creepy feel to it, but that's, again, it's towards the end. Otherwise, it's just... You never worried for Saeed, I think, in this episode. And I think that's what does it.
And I also didn't really think it made much sense why Rousseau didn't just go back to the camp. She's like, I'm better off alone. Because her whole point of trying to keep Saeed there is because she didn't want to be alone. So then why not go back to the camp? That never made any sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. This is one of those where the good point is we're getting introduced to the others. We're expanding some of the story. The bad side is, yeah, exactly that. There's inconsistencies in character motivation and reasons for being. It's like, no, we just want this someone to appear and disappear and give us information and then go away. That becomes Rousseau's job, I think. Through much of the rest of her appearance is like, appear, exposition, and disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Cool. So let's get into the next episode, which is Raised by Another, which is always one of my favorite episodes. This is the opposite, where I think it's not as well liked as I liked it. I was completely blown away. I actually like Claire as a character, mainly because they don't explore her as much as they could have, and I'd always want more. And I actually liked her character better in season 1. She was a bit less whiny than she got in later seasons. But I think it was interesting getting, obviously getting the backstory of how she became a single mother and how she got on the plane, and then the whole reveal that the psychic was, told her that she needed to raise the son by herself, and she ended up on the plane. And of course, this episode is also very strong for introducing like Ethan, and the fact that Hurley finds out that he's one of the others, and that's someone who's been living amongst them and actually on the planet, which I thought was one of the most chilling, like, horror moments, like so chilling. When Hurley figured it out, and then you see Ethan kidnapping Claire and Charlie. I did love this episode to death. Anyway, Darrin, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, William Mapother, who is always playing the creepy bad guy. And funnily enough, I've met William Mapother at a couple of events and so on. Nicest guy. He is one of those people just like, I would love for you to be able to play in a comedy, to be the buddy, to be the hero, because every time, and it's because he has that perfect kind of like dead stare face of like, you don't know where his emotion is or what is happening. And I think that he's kind of caught up into that. But
did you see him in that indie movie? It was called like Another Earth or Second Earth or something like that.
No, I didn't see that one.
Oh, you should definitely check that out. He wasn't necessarily a nice guy, but he played the love interest. So he wasn't the villain; he was the love interest. So
okay, see, that's good. Give him a chance to do something big. But that same point, he plays that effect so well here. And it's kind of a bummer that we only see him for really a couple of episodes. But he's sort of I think that perfect introduction of scary character. And you're right. I think the emotions that we have with Claire, who wasn't originally a main character in the pilot. I don't think she got main character status until second episode, until it was actually picked up.
Okay.
So yeah. But so good.
Cool. All right, cool. But would you think this is one of the better episodes of the season, like I do?
Oh yeah, by far. Because you're right. This gets into, we're really getting that creepy vibe where they imply that with the end of the last season, and here when we do have Claire's whole nightmare mystery, and then Ethan showing up. I think this ratcheted up the tension, and I think this gave some of our danger back into the show, which was, I don't know, it felt like it was losing. It had some mystery, but it focused more character. This brought danger back into us.
Absolutely. And also jumping back into the chat real quick, X-Men is saying that Sawyer's actor was originally supposed to be played by a non-Southern character and was supposed to be villainous, but the writers changed their mind after a few episodes. Yeah, I heard all about that. Like, most of the characters or actors who play other characters originally auditioned for Sawyer. Like, what's the guy who plays Hurley originally auditioned for Sawyer? I think Matthew Fox originally auditioned for Sawyer, and they originally had him being from Pittsburgh, but when they had what's-his-face audition, who they eventually cast, they're like, and he was doing a different accent at first, and they're like, no, just do your Southern accent. So they made the character Southern based off of them, which I actually think it worked, and I think maybe that's why they were a bit confused about his character in season 1, that they were still sort of finding it.
Yeah, well, see, that totally makes sense. I mean, and the reality is Josh Holloway, we only see him as Sawyer. Even when I see him in other things, I'm like, hey, it's Sawyer. He is always going to be. They tried to cut his hair on some other shows, and it's like, and then like by the third episode, his hair's back long again. That's how everybody wants to see him.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So let's go ahead and move over to the next episode, which is All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues. This is an episode I liked a lot better on my recent rewatch. I mean, I always thought this was a strong episode, but after watching it recently, I think this is a really great episode. I think this is the better Jack flashback, where you get the backstory with him and his father, which is actually really, I liked it. It's playing with the juxtaposition of having the flashback in the island story, and Jack is sort of in the same state of mind in both, because here he's like trying to correct a mistake because he brushed Claire off when she tried to warn him, and so he's feeling guilty about it, so he's trying desperately to rescue her, and as his flashback, he's dealing with this moral dilemma of what to do with his father, who basically killed the patient because he was drinking on the job. And I thought it was a great combination of both, even though in the island story we don't see much happen other than they chase after Ethan, and then Ethan kicks Jack's ass. But then you have that epic scene at the end, which is one of my favorite scenes, where Charlie is hanging from the tree and you think he's dead, but they save his life. So I think it was a very strong episode. Darrin, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Again, this is we've got that danger, especially that you're right, that shot at the end where we've got Charlie hanging from the tree. You're like, oh my God, really ramps things up. Definitely a good blend of flashback story, building on background character for what the character is going through in the modern times. You're right. I think they balanced that one out really, really well. I'm just going to keep talking. Looks like we lost Mark. There, he's back. Okay, lost you for a half second there. But yeah, I think that was awesome. Just checking my notes. And also, I think this is the first time where we get the first glance or hint at the hatch.
Oh yes, yeah, definitely.
You know, which becomes the big kind of background thing for the rest of the season. And this is where I think, and in that sense, I think it's good because it sort of repeats with the last chunk of episodes with second season. That this gives a good background for characters to latch onto a pursuit, a solid part of the mystery from the island to go into versus just these random things happening in the background.
Yeah. I think it was great, the subtle way they introduced it here, and it just slowly became a bigger thing. Definitely. Cool. So let's go ahead and move over to the next episode, which is, I think, one of the worst episodes of the entire show, whatever the case may be. I think if you look up filler in the dictionary, they should have a picture of this episode or a link to watch this episode. This, to me, defines what filler, especially after that whole Claire epic with the Ethan thing, and it was so on edge and so want to find out, and then you get this complete and utter waste of time where, oh, there's a case, we're going to open it up. And I guess they're playing off of like the, whatchamacallit, the triangle, love triangle with Sawyer, Jack, and Kate, which I never cared. I don't care about. And I mean, I somewhat cared about, but not as much to have this whole episode. And I think the backstory we get with Kate, like, you could easily throw that out and it wouldn't affect her character one bit. And I guess, like, the only purpose this episode actually serves is to give them the guns. But they could have done that in like a 2-minute scene in any episode. We did not need an entire episode devoted to it.
Oh, no, I agree, filler-wise, and I think this is where we start to see some of the backstories to be exactly that, filler, to kind of go in. Because you're right, none of the information we really get out of this episode really propels things along forward all that much. You know, you could have squeezed most of this, like you said, down to a 2 or 4 minute little scene and have accomplished just as much as what this episode does. And I know they've got really long seasons, especially the first couple seasons of this show. And this is, I think, this is what you get when you have overly long seasons. It's like, we just got to fill up time. We got to give more backstory.
I also get the impression from watching this episode that they weren't sure yet what they were going to do with Kate's character and her backstory. That they were just, let's have her rob a bank, because they still just weren't sure what they wanted to do.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying with the first one, is they seem to be kind of indecisive of which direction they want to sort of take Kate in, how much of a villain, how much of a good guy, how much of her motivation, how much is personal. And later on, they do eventually give us, I think, a good solid idea. But here, yeah, it's like they're playing with ideas and they're filling time.
All right, cool. So speaking of bad episodes, let's get into the next episode, which is Hearts and Minds, Boone flashback, where we reveal that Boone and Shannon get it on. Oh, who cares? I never liked these characters. I think we can say this because they both died by the end of season 2. But I think the writers realized these characters weren't working. And this episode in particular, like the island story, Locke gives Boone some peyote, makes him trip where he sees the monster. Such a misuse of the monster. This episode is another filler, and they really didn't know what to do with these characters, Boone and Shannon. But
yeah, and they were some of the more annoying characters. You know, you're right. We're getting through halfway through the season, and I think everybody's realized that. Look, just having Shannon sunning herself on the beach, and Boone going back and forth like, Shannon, you got to be part of things. Come on, Shannon, you can't just leave down. You know, it's just, yeah, they don't know what to do. It's like there's so many more other interesting characters, and yet it felt like there was this necessity to put this time and focus on these two people that don't really do anything, don't contribute to anything. I mean, Boone's job, I think, through most of these chunk of episodes is basically to help build up Locke's mystique. You know, that's when they actually finally decided to do something with the character, because before that he was just useless. But from this episode onward, he becomes Locke's lackey. Sure.
And so he serves a purpose in that way, of course, but the biggest purpose he serves is to die, which we'll get to later, I guess. But this is the whole thing with the peyote too is just like.
No. That wasn't it. And again, it's one of those things where we're getting into some of Locke's like knowledge and understanding of the island that never really pays off again later on.
Yeah.
Especially once he gets sort of like hatch fixated. But yeah, this is like, the mystery lock that that the confidence we never really see this level, I think, again.
Cool. So X-Men in the chat says, whatever the case may be, wasn't that annoying until the reveal of the airplane. I turned into Hurley and yelled, "Dude," several times. I think it was annoying throughout, but the reveal of the airplane was kind of dumb as well. Yes, I actually had the benefit of having seen the ending, so I knew what the airplane was leading to. So I actually think that helped it for me, but just having the toy anyway. Let's move on to the next episode, which is special. This is an episode my brother always bashes for the island storyline of the polar bear going after Walt, which I think this is probably one of the worst island storylines, because it was just filler. It's just to give Locke and Michael something to bond over. It's like, oh, let's have Walt attacked by a polar bear. But and it's just like polar bears, they treat them like monsters in the show. That's not how they're animals. That's not how they behave.
No, I agree. And I have to say, one of the reasons I don't necessarily like this episode, and several of them going in, is I've never been a big fan of Michaal's character. I find
really
one of the more annoying characters. Walt, he's so insistent upon his point of view, never really listens to anybody else. Of the character, I mean, all right, Boone and Shannon probably are some of the worst. But to me, Michael he was always on my nerves whenever he was on. He just seemed to want to constantly pick a fight, then try and work with anyone at any point. And it got tiring after a while. If he had evolved as a character somewhat over the first couple seasons, that would be one thing, but he never really does. He becomes very much the same character. Yeah,
I don't know if I agree with that. I think he does evolve in this episode. I think he becomes less sort of yelly. And I think the transition was not done well. I think it was unbelievable to all of a sudden hating Locke and wanting to kill him to being good buddies with him. But I think going forward, I think they do define this character a bit more. And the other thing I was going to say about this episode is that I love the flashbacks. This is kind of like what they did with Michael and Walt. It's kind of like what they did with Charlie, where they had the quintessential go through the whole entire backstory in one episode. You don't really need another flashback after that. So I think the flashbacks tell a really touching father and son relationship, how Walt believes he was just a deadbeat dad that abandoned him, but when we find out that's actually not the case, that the mother was pushing him away. So I liked the episode for that aspect of it. The island storyline was just a wash, though. To me, this is an example. A lot of episodes in season 1 are like this, where it has an awesome flashback, but the island storyline is kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, I'll definitely go with that. Like I said, it is a good backstory. You're right. It is another one of those, much like the Charlie. You really get a good, solid understanding of the character and the motivations and their connections with that backstory. Just Michael generally annoys me. That did make him a little bit more sympathetic, I suppose.
Yeah.
Walt! I'm just going to keep yelling that in the background.
Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is Homecoming, which I think is the inverse of what I was just talking about, where you have a good island story and you have a shitty flashback. And then we touch on with Charlie and how all this is another Charlie flashback that was a waste of time. It was him trying to con this woman and he ends up wanting to care for her. It's like we really didn't need this, didn't help at all. But the island storyline, we get Ethan returning. He kills Scott. He threatens to kill Charlie. He wants to take Claire back, and they end up get the guns and they team up on him, and Charlie ends up killing him. All of that I thought was top notch. That was top level suspense. But I think the flashback hurt this episode.
Yeah, but again, we got William Mapother back being creepy. We have others. We've got the return of Claire. So these are people that we've been sort of invested in now coming back, and they don't drag it out. You're right. This is all accomplished kind of in one episode, with her returning, the big face-off, and then Charlie kind of flipping into protection mode and killing Ethan, as a way to sort of save and protect Claire. and sort of revenge for what has happened. So, not to mention, he was hung from a tree. So,
yeah,
got a little something internal, I think, on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the backstory, yeah, we already know that he was a drug addict. We know that there's hard times. And we know about Drive Shaft and people liking it. You know, there wasn't a whole lot that was gleaned in the backstory. Certainly not from a motivation standpoint for Charlie. If they had framed it as a reason why he would take that whole steps and react so violently against the return of Ethan, that would play out. But the flashback episodes don't do any of that.
Yeah, and I did like how they didn't have Claire away for too long. Like, they resolved that storyline just after a few episodes, but they left it a mystery of what actually happened to her while she was gone. That's something they don't touch on until season 2, which I do like. I think that did actually work a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that.
Cool. So let's move on over to the this seems like almost a speed stream. Anyway, let's move over to the next episode, which is Outlaws. Now, this is another classic episode where I think the flashbacks are actually somewhat decent. I think these are the better Sawyer flashbacks, where we go him, see him go why he went to Australia. It's to kill the con man Sawyer, but we find out he's just been used and duped by another con man.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the irony with that. But the island story was dumb. He was like a boar messed up his tent, so he has to go chase the boar. I mean, that was kind of stupid. You get some funny moments with like Saeed teasing Sawyer. It was like, oh, a boar took your tarp. Maybe it wanted to go camping and stuff like that. And I love the never have I ever seen with Kate and Sawyer. I think that was a great character building scene between those two. But other than that, it was kind of the through story. Oh, he's gonna hunt the boar. And they kind of try to imply that the boar is like a reincarnated version of the dude he killed in Australia, which is a cheesy thing. I think it's implied. I think that's cheesy. But anyway, your thoughts?
Yeah, I never got that with the boar being the cheesy thing. I figured this was just, again, another one of those filler episodes where we've got to get something going on in the background, something mysterious, but not really the big mystery. We'll focus on a boar. But yeah, the scene in Australia where Sawyer does finally get up on this guy that he thinks is the original Sawyer, and shoots him and goes through the whole speech, reads the letter out, and the guy's just like, tell so-and-so I would have paid him back.
Yeah.
and just that moment that he has been totally suckered into, that all of his emotion was used against him, and he had almost that cathartic release and then gets denied. That's definitely, I think, the strongest point for the episode. The never have ever, that was a good character build between the two. But yeah, the whole island boar story, that was filler. It's almost like take these flashbacks and put them back with a good episode and get rid of these that had the bad flashbacks and.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was a bit disappointed that we never saw Robert Patrick on the show before, because they sort of teased him in this episode.
Yeah, that's right. He did just sort of pop and then disappeared. Yeah. It would have that would have been more of an interesting thing, but I don't know. I guess this is season 1. You're always trying to figure out which is going to grab and which isn't, and which is going to bring us to new and interesting storylines. So.
Cool. All right, let's go ahead and get to the next episode, which is In Translation. And I really like this episode. I always try to fit it into my top 20, but it doesn't always fit in because it's not quite that good. But I think it's an underrated, strong episode because I like how this is when Lost first started playing with flipping the perspective on the backstory, because you had Sun's backstory where she saw Jen has this like ruthless killer, and you flip it, you get Jen's perspective where he's actually just a nice guy who's being forced to do awful things by the rich father who, because he wants to stay married to her, and how this like destroying him and stuff. So I thought that was amazing, and I love the ending where Jen and Sun break up because he finds out she speaks English, and you see her like swimming with her bikini, something that Jen would never let her do, and they're playing like the music, which I thought was probably my favorite musical montage of the show, or of the first season at least. Your thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, I'll agree that was a good musical montage, and those normally annoy the heck out of me, especially nowadays. Yes. It's like in every show. It angers me at this point. But yeah, and I mentioned this before when we were talking about the first episode that showed Sun's point of view of this. This is, to me, using those flashbacks really well, showing that alternate perspective, that the story that you were told previously isn't the whole story. There's another different side of it. And I think, yeah, that was one of the brilliant stuff. It's one of those things that I really was hoping that they'd play with a lot more. And I think they hit on a few points here and there, but this, I think, was one of the best uses of that. And it makes, yes, Jin, who were not really sure where he's coming from. Is he ruthless? Is he harsh? You get to see, no, man, he wants nothing more than to get rid of the dad and just be with Sun. And he feels compelled and stuck to do this in order to. And most of his reactions are as a result of that. And I think yeah.
Yeah, but I think the downside of the episode is the whole Who Burned the Wrath storyline. I think that was kind of filler. It kind of didn't really need to be there. And like Sawyer, even he references Lord of the Flies. It's like it's Lord of the Flies now when he takes Jen captive. And I think that was a bit too on the nose and too much.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, you're building up some conflict and you're stretching things out. I mean, especially they were getting the raft built pretty good, and they're like, well, we still got several more episodes before the end of the season. We gotta take out the raft for a little while and have them rebuild.
Yeah, cool. So just in the chat, X-Men is saying, the island storylines were very random. Most people like season 1 because it sparked a now legendary series, but it lacked a lot in island storylines in a lot of the episodes. And I totally agree with that, which is why I said season 1 isn't my favorite season, because I do think a lot of the island storylines are lacking.
I would completely agree. I think they did a good thing of setting up some of the mystery ideas, but really developing what it is that's actually going on. They didn't really seem to focus on any of that in the first season.
Cool. So next, let's go ahead and get into one of my all-time favorite episodes, like up there, Numbers. I love this episode. This does a lot for the mythology, and plus it's just a good episode. It does a great job of being very creepy and intense and comedic at the same time, because it's the first, they waited till the end of the season to give us a Hurley episode, and they really threw everything at it. Hurley has that classic humor in it that's funny, and yet it does such a great job of having how the numbers, like, after he wins the lottery, people just start dying around him. And they make that funny at sometimes when, like, the guy just fell outside the window when he was with his accountant and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's generally creepy. Like that scene where he goes to Australia and he talks to the widow of the guy who had the numbers before him was such an intense, creepy scene where he talks about how he killed himself to get away from the numbers. Like, I think... And I guess we'll touch more on this in the spoiler section. I think the follow-up to this episode isn't as strong as the episode itself. But I still look on this episode very fondly. I think this is a very powerful episode. And it completely changed the perspective of her character by saying that he actually won, like, millions of dollars in the lottery, which is a bold move. But anyway, your thoughts on the episode, Darrin?
Yeah, I've got to agree. This is it was nice that they spent some time to really get an idea of what they wanted for Hurley. So when we do get his backstory, it does play really strong. And seeing I think this really shows Jorge Garcia's ability to really live in Hurley's skin, because we get to see him slowly losing it and questioning everything around. And you're right. Once he gets to Australia and he's able to talk with the widow, who confirms his belief that the numbers are cursed, there is such a release from his moment. And he's like, thank you. You're the first person that acknowledged it's all I wanted to hear. It's like, I wanted to know I wasn't crazy. And yeah, it's just, it really gives Hurley such a strong character moment. And yeah, the fact that the least expecting guy is the richest guy on the island
and that's
is very comic. I love that.
And I agree, it was a great cathartic moment where Russo actually, like, that was a great ending way to end the show, where he found the sort of vindication that he was looking for just by someone believing him.
Yeah, exactly. And I you know, again, it's one of those stronger character moments, definitely in the first season.
Cool. So let's go ahead and jump into the next episode with Deus Ex Machina. This is I think this is a stronger Locke episode in terms of the island story. I think this is when they really start to play with the visions and destiny. Again, they get into the creepiness of him having that vision of Boone saying Teresa falls up the stairs, Teresa falls down the stairs, and you realize that the backstory is that it was his babysitter who fell down the stairs and died. And it's all leading them on this vision quest, which ends with Boone's death, which again, I think this is probably the best, or, he dies in the next episode, but basically the injuries that will kill him. And that ending scene when Locke's pounding on the hatch, like yelling at it, like that's just so raw, it's so great, especially the way it intercut with this flashback of his father betraying him and conning him out of the kidney. I definitely think that, this is definitely one of the stronger episodes. Darrin.
Oh yeah, because we get all of Locke's. Like we understand. I think by the end of this episode, we understand a lot of that angst and that questioning and that internal pursuit for Locke. And yeah, that final scene when he's cursing at the god, "Show me something. Why am I here?" And he's pounding on it. Suddenly, that light just up into his face. It does. What we've gotten story-wise here is that Locke has a connection with the island that nobody else seems to have. And I think this really plays in with it. And again, now that we've actually seen the hatchet, there's something to it. It's not just this mysterious, unknown piece of metal thing down there, but there's something alive and reactive about it. I think is super engaging, and it gives support to Locke's sort of like faith obsession that he plays with going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this episode probably does the best job of really establishing Locke's connection with the island. So I agree. This is like a milestone for this series. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the next episode, which is Do No Harm. Actually, I think I like this episode a lot. I think the flashback with Jack marrying was boring and a waste of time. But I mean, it just went to show that he's struggling. Oh, my wedding vows. Who cares about your wedding vows? I mean, come on. We have these other flashbacks where it's a matter of life and death, and we're supposed to care about Jack's wedding vows. But I think the island story is very powerful, with Jack like really trying to save Boone's life and having to deal with the fact that he can't. It was a great character moment for him, and at the same time, of course, Claire is giving birth, which is a great moment with Kate having to connect with Claire on that level. And the ending was probably the first epic use of the life and death theme, where we get, which is what it was named after, where we get Boone's death and then Claire giving birth at the same time, and seeing the camp deal with both of those situations was very touching. It's hard for me not to shed a tear with that one. Your thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, and it felt to me, again, I think originally and definitely on the rewatch, that this seemed to be sort of implying a balance to the island. With one birth, there has to be a death. I think was sort of a subtle implementation, story that was implied in with this, which felt this. It gave, again, that ethereal extra level quality into the island. And then, of course, a lot of our downsides is this is the same time where we've got Saeed and Shannon out having their first big candlelight dinner. And, of course, because of that, Shannon is not there with her brother dying, which, again, just ends up adding more drama later on.
Oh, God, I hate this Saeed-Shannon relationship so much.
That relationship never made sense to me. That seemed like the most intentional, shoehorned relationship. I didn't see why these two got together. Shannon has really been nothing but sort of just a waste of a character on the island doing anything. It's like, you're pretty, but that's all you got. By season 2, I was glad there were some definite cast changes going on. But this was just the first of like, all right, we know that these characters annoy. We're going to take out one right here. It felt like they were serving the audience with this choice.
And it's the best thing they could have done with Boone's character, too. It actually made him serve a purpose by killing him off, because his death did have a huge impact on things going forward. Where his his character alive had no impact. Anyway,
yeah. It was to boost up Locke's mystique, and then here it was to discover the hatch and move on. So yeah, it was the best use of this character who otherwise had none.
Anyway, we'll get to the next episode, which is the greater good. Speaking of useless Kit Shannon storylines, I don't buy that she's gonna get a gun and try to kill Locke. I'm sorry, I just do not buy it. It does not work for me. No. I think the whole that whole storyline was dumb, but I do like the rest of the episode. I think the rest of the episode was really powerful. I love the Saeed interrogating Locke, and the fact that it really establishes Saeed as someone who can spot a lie, no matter how expert the liar. And I think Locke is an interesting play between the two characters, because Locke, I think, knew this, which is why he was trying not to lie. He was trying to keep his lies to a minimum, but eventually Saeed still called him out anyway, which I love the interplay. And his Saeed flashbacks I also love. I think his stronger flashbacks, seeing him having to betray an old friend in order to try to find Nadia, to try to find the love of his life, and how the friend basically killed himself because of that. That was very powerful. Although it did remind me of 24 a bit, the whole terrorist thing. But I still think it was a very strong flashback. But anyway, your thoughts there?
No. I agree. I did like the flashback parts because it puts Saeed in a real interesting position where he's got to push. He doesn't want to have anything to do with it, but he has to push his friend and lie in order to save the woman that he loves, or get in contact back with Nadia, the woman that he loves. And then it ends up costing his friend's life. I mean, yeah, it's a very visceral flashback sequence, I think, through this episode, which gave its power. And it's one of those where I think, again, you get great backstory with not necessarily a great island story. Though you're right, the interplay between Saeed and Locke in this was interesting, and it was great showing those two kind of strong characters feel each other out almost, and see who's on top of it. Is it Locke, the island master, or is it Saeed, who can really see the truth of anyone? And this is where they start implying the whole how much Saeed can he knows if you're lying or not. He's got that gut instinct, and that really plays especially well into season 2.
Yeah, absolutely. So not a total waste of episode. But anyway, let's. In the chat, X-Men was saying that it was hinted at in an early episode that Hurley was rich. Walt beat him in the backgammon and said that Hurley owes him $20,000. Hurley says that Walt will receive it. I thought he was lying at first. Oh yeah, I did notice that in retrospect, going back and watching it, that there were dropping hints, and there were also little hints. You actually saw Hurley on the TV winning the lottery in the gym flashback in the episode that aired right before it. So I think they knew maybe 5 episodes before about this, and so they started dropping hints. But they definitely didn't know at the start of the show.
And that's what always you can tell that they have certain storylines and ideas planned out, is that does give them the ability to drop those hints and sort of build up with it, which in contrast with stuff they're like, well, let's try this, and suddenly some whole new character thing pops up. Well, where did that come from? Yeah, exactly.
Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next episode, which is Born to Run. Now, I on IMDb, this is in the bottom 5 lowest rated episodes, and I disagree with that rating because I love the flashbacks to this episode. Yes, the island storyline was a waste of time of Kate trying to get on the raft, and then they find out that she's a fugitive, but nobody really cares, and it doesn't affect anything anyway. But I love the flashbacks. I think it's probably Kate's strongest flashbacks, where we see the backstory of how she basically had this, childhood friend who they had a fling even though he was married, and she ended up killing him because he refused to get out of the car, and her desire to run outweighed her desire to save his life, and so she basically sacrificed him. And I think that was a good reveal of what the toy plane meant, although I still think the toy plane was stupid. But I think there's a very powerful, very emotional flashbacks. Your opinion, Darrin?
Yeah, I gotta agree. This is another one of those that just sort of gut kicks you, because it's like once he gets in the car, it's like he's dead. You know that this was not going to end well at all for him. And yeah, the plane. See, this is one of those where it's like we saw the plane, and that's the reason why she was going in and breaking into the bank earlier, and what was in the case, and what the marshal was holding above her head. And you're like, okay, well, what's the connection with the plane? And then it's like, well, we need to do something with it. Let's say the plane is an ex-boyfriend's. Okay, and that'll explain. It felt like they'd create this little mystique, and then they were like, well, we have to assign this to somebody. And so it's from a time capsule that they picked up, and that's why she wants to hold on to it, which again doesn't really seem like it should be that huge of a draw for her character, just the memory of this mistake of getting this guy killed. But that's, again, this is, I think, where they're really trying to tweak now Kate's story to make it, she's heroic, but she's made bad choices.
And I think this is the better job of that.
Yes. Yeah, this is, I think, when they've really kind of cinched down how to best tell that particular story.
Cool. All right, so let's get into the 3-part finale, Exodus. Wow, a lot to say about this. So, I don't know. The first thing I want to talk about with this episode is it's a way to pay lip service to season 1, to be like, and also to remind everyone. And I think this is a dinosaur sort of old. It's related to the old way of airing TV, 26 episodes, and you air the episodes all out of order, mixed in with reruns and whatnot. So they felt like they needed to remind everyone of what happened in everyone's flashback. So you see them all getting on the plane. There's a very quick reminder of Sawyer's con man, and then Kate's been arrested, and blah, 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 blah. So in the grand scheme of things, I think that these flashbacks don't really work. I don't know. They seem kind of like fan service too, like the whole emotional thing with them being on the plane. I think the episode would have worked better with better flashbacks. But anyway, Darrin, let's just start with the flashbacks. What are your opinions on that?
Yeah, they're I think you hit the nail right on the head right there. This is we're summoning up season 1, and we're building up all these little storylines that we have told. So we're seeing how the stories that we have told now put them where the season started, which, again, from a storytelling standpoint, is interesting in a way, but it's also really unnecessary, because we don't why they were on the plane, or the fact that, this is also, are we covering all 3 episodes in this?
All three. Yeah. All 3.
Because this is also where we get the first shot of Ana Lucia in the bar with Jack at the airport there, who, even watching it, you're like, well, this isn't someone that's just going to come in for like half of a scene. This is definitely implying something going forward. But yeah, I don't think flashback wise there was a whole lot that was really gleaned out of this, outside of just, I think, audience satisfaction of kind of like almost like getting the flashbacks to catch up to where we are in real time. Yeah. Sort of felt like the purpose off of that.
Now, getting into the island story, this is the whole, of course, launching of the raft, which was seen. It was an epic piece of music that's still like classic, and they play it at orchestras and stuff. But the scene itself, I have a hard time getting that big into it in retrospect, knowing that the raft's just going to be destroyed. They're all going to have to go back anyway. And they made such a big deal out of it, everyone waving goodbye and everything. So I don't know. I got sort of mixed feelings about this, particularly watching it in retrospect. But like the ending where they actually do like kidnap Walt, like that was a gut punch. That was like, this is, I think, was lost during the whole non-spectacle. It was like a fake out, because it says the others are coming, they're coming for a boy, and everyone thinks they're coming for Aaron, but no, they're actually going out in the boat to the raft to get Walt, which I think was very effective.
Oh yeah, because it's the first that we see of the others. And they come up on a boat, and you're just like, oh my God, they've been out there. They're going to be rescued. I mean, they really sucker us into that scene, especially when the guy says like, yeah, wow, you guys are all the way out here. That's amazing. Well, we're going to have to take the boy. What? I mean, what should drop the line of like, what are you talking about? And then it all just goes to hell. You get the shot, you get the tossing of the dynamite there, the explosion and everything. Yeah, it really did, I think, left us, ending the season on just this whole, oh my God, not only what has happened to Walt, but who are these people? and give us, again, it's the reward that we've had. We've talked about the others. How dangerous are they? Well, pretty dangerous. They're going to go and take your stuff and then just get out of here. And they look like crazed pirates.
Yeah, and then you also get the quest with going to the Black Rock, because Black Rock has been mentioned all season. We find out here is actually a ship that's in the middle of the jungle, and Art's, of course, blowing himself up, which I think was fun.
Arzt was awesome in this whole sequence because he is like the audience player that's telling all of the thoughts that the audience has been asking, like,
yes.
There are other people. It's not just you guys aren't the only ones on the island. There's a whole bunch of the rest of us. And we're just like, oh, can we be in the loop? Can we be included with the big boy story? And, so I think all of Art's little characters, all of his lines, half of them served, I think, audience questions of like, what is everybody else doing? It does seem like there's like 5 people on the island.
But it was also a great interplay between him and Hurley, the whole Arnst thing. And the fact that he comes on with the dynamite, he's yelling at Jack and Locke. It's like, you idiots, Bob, this is what you're supposed to do. And he just blows himself up by handling it incorrectly.
And it's that great moment, too, where it's like, all fine. And it's like he forgets for a moment. You see, he's like, yeah, and it's just amazing. It's like he does that one flick.
Yeah.
And Hurley gets that great line with Jack afterwards, like, you got a little Arzt on you.
That was absolutely amazing. But I know that some people, apparently when this episode first came out, were upset that it ended without showing what was in the hatch. It never really bothered me that much. I mean, I guess it would have been nice to see what was down in there, but knowing how they revealed it in season 2, like, I wouldn't change a thing. I think the way they handled it was perfect, actually.
Yeah, no. But see, this you can't complain. This is how season finales end. It's the perfect thing. You lose Walt, the boat is blown up, and you've got the others revealed. That's a huge thing. And the other one is the hatch opens, and you get that great shot just looking all the way down, into the ground as they pull back there. It's just, that is perfect. That is how you end a season. You get the cliffhanger, you get the mystery, and that allows that for the next season, you're going to get to dive in, but now you've got a whole summer to go, what's in the hatch? What's down there? What are they going to find?
And that's such an iconic shot as well, with Jack and Locke looking down and the hatch, the way it goes like that. It's just, yeah,
exactly. No, I mean, that is how you end a season. You don't want the reveal there, because the reveal is how you're going to develop the storyline going in the next season, which really is season 2 is the hatch. That's what season 2's subtitle is. It's all the hatch.
Yeah, basically. Cool. So Cardinal Doomsday, good to see you. You're back. Hope you're feeling better. X-Men says, I always laughed at the horn-like sound of the smoke monster. It's almost as if he's taunting his victims. He's saying, I'm coming, bitches. I think that's a good point. I always thought that horn did sort of signify, like, scariness, like something's coming for you. So I think that is a good point. JC, it was J. Craman? Oh, sorry. He says, I wish the monster sounds at the beginning of the show weren't giant footsteps. Oh, were they? Oh, didn't notice that.
Well, there was a lot of the knocking of the trees and stuff like that that sounded like this big, like, what is that coming? It did, I think, in the first episode, it did give sort of like a King Kong feel in the background.
Yeah. I think it was good seeing, I think Exodus, which we didn't touch on, I think that we actually saw the smoke for the first time. We saw it as a form of smoke where it grabbed Locke. So that was a really cool as well. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into season 2. So before we get into the episode, just general thoughts on season 2. I'm going to start by saying season 2 is probably my favorite season of the entire show. I think this is where everything gelled. It was like season 1, but it built off of, instead, because we said with season 1 had a lot of issues with the island stories not coming together. And I think season 2 had the perfect combination of island and flashback and deepening the mystery and character story. It was that great combination of characters, and mystery, and it started to really deepen, like really make the mysteries a lot more interesting, and had that feeling that I think was kind of lost in later seasons. I think season 3 had too much filler. Season 1, again, that weren't that great with the island storylines, and then of course the last 3 seasons had their whole ball of wax, which we won't get into now. So season 2 for me, even though there were some bad episodes in season 2, don't get me wrong, there were some filler in season 2, but I think overall it just had that strong weirdness feel to it that I really liked. Anyway, Darrin, your thoughts?
Yeah, just as a lot of season 2s generally are. Season 1 is you're finding your steps, you're figuring anything out. Usually by season 2, there's a stronger grip of the storyline, of the characters, of the direction that you want to go. And I think that played this out really well, especially like there's a chunk in the beginning and a chunk at the end, I think, that all worked perfectly smoothly. A little bit of fillers, in the middle, as often are. But yeah, it's like I remember X-Files. X-Files first season was okay, but it was really by season 2 where it's got its footing and it was really embracing its own mythology and really developing things. This is very much the same way. The first one, they want a mystery. They've got some ideas. They're throwing a few things at the wall. They're playing with the backstories. But now you've got through a whole season. You've seen how the audience reacts. You've seen what's interesting, what's gelling with the writers. And I think they're able to really clamp down and have a firmer vision of the story they're trying to tell and how to get those characters to tell that story by season 2 here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. Absolutely, yeah. Totally agree. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into these episodes. Let's start with the Man of Science, Man of Faith, with the awesome, I think it's my favorite opening sequence. It's like every premiere of the season from now on will try to shock you, will try to reveal something that twists you and shock you. And I think this is the best job it did, because you see someone riding exercise bike, making exercise. So everyone's like, people I was watching with this for the first time, oh, is that Sawyer? Oh, is this a flashback? They just assume it's a flashback taking off sign. But then you hear the explosion, you see him start to get the gun, you start to realize something's not up, and then of course it zooms over to see the Jack and Locke looking down at the hatch. You were in the hatch the whole time. That was perfect. And this is why I say they definitely should not have revealed the hatch in season 1, because you needed this awesome opening sequence. And I love how they wasted no time jumping right into that hatch. Darrin, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. And it gives us such great dichotomy as you suddenly have this living, breathing, modern-ish world environment where right outside you have everybody living in squalor and looking for papayas to live and trying to hunt boars to try and get food. And here you got cereal, you got dishes, you got exercise bikes, you got music, you got all of these things. So yeah, it was a perfect setup. And you're right, it does sort of imply this might be a flashback until it shows that no, we're in it. And yeah, they jump right into it. And I think that's one of the smartest things. They're not dragging things out at this point. They really wanted to get in right there. And of course, we have Henry Ian Cusick, who I always love to see.
Oh, yes. Yeah. First time seeing him. But I think the rest of the episode wasn't quite as good. I think they did sort of drag things out with them actually going into the hatch. Like they dragged it out over 3 episodes, which I think they kind of should have got it done with in 1 episode. But I did really enjoy the Jack flashbacks with him performing the miracle on the woman who would become his wife. They kind of teased us in season 1. We get to see it now. And of course, the whole thing with the Man of Science, Man of Faith, a lot of people were saying that it's kind of signifying Locke versus Jack, but actually the writer had said it's Jack's own inner conflict, his own science versus his own faith. And I think that comes off very strongly in this episode, a very strong theme that really works.
Well, yeah, because especially dealing with that whole miracle situation, it is kind of the perfect dichotomy going on within Jack right there. Is he doesn't believe it, and yet it is what's happened, and it has such an effect going forward in his life and relationships and ending relationships too.
Yeah, and I think it was pretty intense. One thing I love about Jack as a character in general is how at the end Desmond had it at gunpoint. He's like, "Put your gun down," and Jack is like, "No," because it's such a TV cliche now just don't hurt him. And Jack's like, no, fuck you, I'm not putting my gun down. And that's really consistent with his character about how he's very stubborn and refuses to let things go. And I absolutely love that. I think it played into his backstory very well.
Well, and we're also getting the great shot of the first meeting of Desmond in Jack's flashback, and then having him be here right now. It adds, again, we're now seeing this higher level connection between the outside world and the people and the island, and there's almost a fait accompli of what is happening here. It's like, what this guy happened to have run into at this one point is now trapped inside here. And it's something they play with a lot more, I think, throughout this season, giving that extra depth. You're seeing characters meeting up in multiple areas. We got a little crossover in season 1 in backgrounds and stuff like this, but here we're seeing a lot more actual physical interplay of people off the island and then back on the island.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things I love about season 2. But anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is Adrift. This is an episode I don't really care for. I suppose you don't care for it either because it's Michael. You can go ahead. This is Michael the whole time doing whoa, and then him bitching the Sawyer about being, and then the shark comes and gets him. And this is what I'm saying too about the whole Michael's almost flashback and special. It was perfect. You don't need those flashbacks here with Michael getting a lawyer and trying to keep Walt here. It's just superfluous. And you also get like the other perspective of, Locke and Kate going in and meeting Desmond in the hatch. But I think that could have been the previous episode. I think this episode was filler, waste of time. Your opinion, Darrin?
Yeah, I don't disagree. The Adrift stuff is all relationship. It's pointless arguments between Sawyer and Michael about being shot and getting the kid go and why didn't you do it? That was all. The big thing that we had is the end where they finally get to shore and then suddenly Jin runs out half tied up. It's like others, yeah. That's the payoff off of this episode. Everything else, like you said, is kind of filler, and it does feel like the whole Desmond Hatch introduction here is getting stretched out, but we still got one more episode where that could have been done all up in the first one, but no, we've got Henry Mike Cusick for a couple of episodes. We're going to stretch it out for a little bit. It's in contract.
Yeah, I remember when I first saw these episodes, I was so sick of hearing, do it or blow his damned head off, brother, because you see that scene like 3 or 4 different times in each episode. It's like, okay, enough already. Let's get to the resolution.
We got it the first time. We don't need to see it again.
Anyway, so let's get to the resolution. Let's get to the next episode, which is Orientation. I do think this was a pretty strong episode. I don't know if I'd say it's one of my favorites because I don't know. I think some of the interplay with Locke refusing to push the button until Jack agrees felt kind of fake to me, and Jack saying why you find it so easy and why you find it so hard. But I did like the whole thing about finding out what the deal with the button is, what it saves the world. What the hell do you mean the button saves the world? It was such an intriguing mystery, and them setting this up like the perfect way. And the numbers you put in is Hurley's numbers, and he freaks out about that and doesn't want to do it. And the Locke flashbacks I think they were okay. I don't have strong feelings about them either way. They introduce Helen, and he's still having issues with his father, so I think you do kind of need that, but I don't think they were the best. So I thought it was a decent episode. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this is something they did play with. This is like all of Locke's storylines, I think, and all of his flashbacks is all in some way tied into his father, and then coming into Helen at one point or another here, kind of like that relationship, and I guess for Locke's storyline, how obsession ends up costing him things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, it gives us some background, but isn't entirely important. The best thing about this, is we're actually getting introduced to the Dharma Initiative, and the tape and the doctor who
Dr. Marvin Candle,
That's right. To me, that is the real interesting stuff. Is we're like, okay, there is something behind this mystery. It's not just a weird island. Now, is it an experiment? Did they cause things? Is this all a result of what they're doing? It adds that whole new level to us, and really gets us wanting for more. again, it's especially with the bits missing from the film. Yeah. Obviously, there's more story here. We're only catching part of it, and one of the more obvious ways, but effective.
Absolutely.
And then I think what we do learn that this is the tail section where Jin and Mike, everybody is, as we start to realize that's who they're with, which does open up again new potential storylines right there. Also,
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and get into the next episode, which is Everybody Hates Hugo. And building off of the tailies, we learn more about them. Michael and Jen and all them come out of their little pit that they were in, and they start to realize that they were actual survivors from the. And I think that was a fascinating storyline. We'll get into that more later, but it was interesting how they slowly fleshed it out. But the episode itself was about Hugo. Now, I have a real axe to grind with this episode.
No, go on. I'm going to be with you on this one.
Because they're trying to have all this food, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it. And at the end, Hurley's like, oh, let's just have a huge party and eat all the food in one night. Realistically, the next day after that party, everyone would be puking their guts out. That was a total waste of food. People, they've been surviving on like fish and guava for like a month at least, or several months, and they suddenly get all these candy bars and potato chips. You can't binge like that. That would make them all desperately sick, and it's a huge waste of food. It was the dumbest resolution.
And how did Harley choose who got what? Because he's just everyone's smiling. He's handing out these nice little packages. What if there's someone like, but I like peanut butter. Oh, I don't like crackers, but I'll take those pears. I mean, it's kind of, this is when they're getting the whole, like, we've got to have that final, like, again, musical montage at the end where everybody is happy and there's this exposure of emotions and stuff. But I would expect there would be a little bit more actual conflict there with just the handing out of food. Maybe starting with, where the hell did all of this come from? But nobody seems to ask that question.
Yeah. And they haven't said itself the through storyline of Hurley not wanting change. Like, I think that's a good idea. It's a good concept. I just don't think it was executed very well. And I didn't really buy it with the whole thing. Oh, just because he was in charge of the food that he freaks out and tries to set off dynamite. I mean, come on, fake stakes. There.
Well, even in the flashback, I mean, there's kind of an interesting idea where he finds the lottery and he has the feeling that this is going to change. So he kind of does a final day without telling anyone. And I mean, I get that. When we get to the end of that flashback and he goes up with his buddy and they go by the gas station where he bought the lottery ticket. First off, how does the lottery owner know that you are the one that bought that one ticket? Did he go through a security cams? How was he able to identify? And then Hurley's concerned that his buddy is going to hate him, and they get that final serious shot of like, you didn't tell me. Yeah, I didn't tell you. We just wanted to have one last day. But now I'm rich. You don't have to go to your job. We could just hang out. Why would his friend hate him so much after this? I get he'd ask the girl he wants her honest reaction if he wants to go out with her or not. But that whole, because I'm rich now, everyone's going to hate me and it changes all of this stuff, I think was really overplayed. That whole last final sequence in the flashback where he's like, again, how does the guy know that it's Hurley who bought the ticket? And why does Hurley think that his friend hates him now because he just became a lottery winner the night before but didn't tell it?
Yeah,
I thought that was really stretched out.
It's interesting concepts, but it wasn't executed very well. Like, I like the relationship between Hurley and his friend, but the actual story of him just leaving him, that made no sense. So I think this episode was a wash. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the next episode, which is And Found. And I really do not like this episode. I think I named this one of the worst episodes of the show as well. The Jen and Son flashbacks are so frustrating. They're so annoying because they're like this before they met, but it's right leading up to when they first meet, and they don't even meet till the very end. So a lot of the stuff before them was like a complete waste of time. Oh, Jen's honorable because he lets the little boy pee in the hotel. I mean, I just don't. I think I hated the flashbacks. I think they were a waste of time. time. The only purpose they serve is to introduce that one dude that Sun has an affair with, which I think they could have done that in a different way. And the island storyline was pretty much a waste of time too, with Sun looking for a wedding. Oh, I lost my wedding ring. Oh, who cares? I mean, the only good part about the episode was the tales section with Michael going off to look for Walt and Jen goes to find them. That was a good sort of character relationship between them, and how Mr. Echo and Jen go search for him. They see the others walk by with like the teddy bear. Like, that was a very creepy and ominous scene.
Yeah.
But that's the only good thing about the episode for me. But anyway,
yeah, no. I was gonna say I'm pretty much right with you on that. Yeah, the one payoff you did have in this episode really is that shot when they're all hiding in the bushes and you just see the feet of the others walk by and they don't make a sound at all. And then you get that final one of the kid with just the teddy bear dangling from. I mean, it's almost like this kind of creepy Winnie the Pooh, dark side of Winnie the Pooh thing. You get this kid just dragging this dirty bear through the underbrush.
And that was like we were saying, is good foreshadowing too, because they introduced where that bear came from in the following episode.
Yeah, again, you can see they had a plan here and they're playing it off, and this worked really well for that creepiness vibe. But yeah, the whole lost wedding ring thing and panic and didn't need that.
Yeah. So would you agree with me that this is a really bad episode, or?
Yeah, again, it's one of those filler episodes where it's like, we've got to get something going. We're going to imply a little bit, but we have this one thing. We want to do a reveal for the others. How do we structure this whole episode over getting one last little sneaky reveal of the others? That's what it felt like.
Yeah, basically. All right, so let's get to the next episode, which is Abandoned. And I've shat on Shannon a lot, and I didn't like her character, and I was glad they killed her off. But that being said, I think her flashbacks in this episode work. I think she was a shitty, annoying character for up until this point, and then they finally develop her into someone who's like realistic, who her stepmother took all her money away from her, didn't believe in her. Nobody believed that she was competent, so she let that interfere with her, and that affected her relationships going forward. So she became a very sort of interesting, dynamic character, and now she's dead. So that's kind of annoying me that they waited till right out before they killed her to actually make her interesting and to just kill her off. But whatever, at least she's gone. And of course, the whole Shannon Saeed relationship throughout this episode, absolutely hate that. And the tell section survivor thing with them sort of coming close to the camp, but Sawyer's collapsed and he needs to be carried, and Lucia wants to leave him for dead, and they're risking being caught by the others, and the others do come in and they take Cindy. All that was good. So yeah. I can't say this is a bad episode. It's kind of middling. But anyway, your thoughts, Darrin?
I'm with you on that. And in fact, this is one of those where they sort of implied with, I think, one of the earlier Shannon flashbacks, but definitely with this one. To me, this counteracts so much of the character that Shannon played in the first season, because in the first one, she acted completely like a spoiled rich brat that was completely taken care of. And you find out, no, for the past a while, she's been busting her butt and having to scam and do all sorts of things in order to survive, which seems very counter to the type of character she was playing in season one. So to me, this is, it's definitely one of those where they're like, okay, we finally got a grasp on what to do with this character. And we're going to kill her because she annoys people. We've gone too far. And to have it the way that it is, with the whole pursuing Walt and then shot in the dark. And, it's like, again, Saeed was happy. We can't have Saeed happy. We have to make him unhappy, and we have to have conflict with the tailies. How do we do this? We'll kill Shannon, who've been wanting to get rid of anyway.
Yeah. It seemed like just a fake way to create a conflict between the tailies. And so I don't know. I was a bit iffy on that. But anyway, in the chat, JC is saying, in Abandoned, the promo that week was the one of the characters would die by the end. I was tricked and thought it was going to be Sawyer. Yeah, that's what the promos wanted you to do. I think I remember that. It just showed like flashes of all the main characters. Who's going to die?
Oh, yeah. He's going out of it and everything with the gunshot. And
yeah, and it's like they tried to fool you, make you think it was Sawyer. But it's just a character you don't give a shit about. So it was kind of a dumb fake out.
And Cardinal Doomsday, yes, I agree with you. She did annoy the crap out of me also. Yeah. And I heard a rumor that Maggie Grace was a little difficult to work with on set, and that might have contributed to things. But there's a few rumors that go on, especially I'll touch on later on when we get closer to the end of the season. There's a few ones that some are true and some are not.
Right. Yeah, I'll be interested in that. But anyway, also Cardinal Doomsday says that I was in the chat Alt-Shift-X stream yesterday, and Shift said the others, and I thought Lost. See, that's why I don't know if you read the Ice and Fire books, Darrin, but the White Walkers in the Ice and Fire books are referred to as others. I never call them others because I always think of the lost others. I can't. That's why I always say White Walkers, even though I don't care what the books say, because the others are the people from Lost.
Yeah, they've taken that title. That's all them. That's all them.
And some people actually think that the reason why they didn't call them others in the show in White Walkers was because they didn't want people getting confused with Lost or thinking of Lost.
Yeah, and that would make sense. I mean, well, Ice and Fire, came out before Lost did, so it would make sense that he wouldn't have he'd be calling them their own thing. But yeah, and that's learning audience. That's changing times. It's much more interesting to refer to them as White Walkers than others, and then later give them a name.
I think White Walker is more interesting personally. Anyway, sure. Let's get into the next episode, which is Collision. Oh, no, sorry, I'm skipping one. The Other 48 Days. Can't skip this episode. This is a great episode.
This really is.
It is a unique episode that it totally changes up the format. It goes back, and I love how they slowly introduce the tail section survivors, not make that big of a deal, but they slowly become a bigger deal, and then we go right back and get a full episode with them that starts at the very beginning. Instead of doing the flashback format, we go straight from day one when the plane first crashed and follow them and see Goodwin, who was one of the others who tricked them, and Anna Lucia thought this other dude was another, ended up putting him in the cage, but Goodwin killed him, and then she found out who Goodwin was and killed him. Like the whole sequence and seeing their point of view and the bond that they created, and that really fleshed out these characters. And I love how they didn't do it right when you first met them. You meet them a bit first, and then you get it. I think this episode is amazing. Darrin.
So with you on that, especially that opening shot from the beach where you don't see where it's anything. It's just all peaceful, and then you get that in the distance, there's something coming, and then it's the whole tail section flipping through the air and landing into the water, and then everyone coming. I mean, it's such a visceral moment. I think it much like the first shot in episode 1, but here we get to see the actual landing. There we see the immediate after effect and people coming to. Here we get to see the tail section hit, which automatically puts us in the how did anyone survive this landing?
Yeah.
Implying you get the creepiness, you get the kids that they're working with, and then the abduction, and then they're being taken. The stuff that they've said in our slow introduction with the tail section, we now get to see all of these moments. And Goodwin, we get to see the others again infiltrating immediately into one of the groups, much like Ethan did to get information, just from the other perspective. And I love how they've worked Echo in this, who initially we haven't seen any talking and any conversation. And here we get to see again, he's just this huge guy just instantly reacting to these assaults. And this was great. And you're right. It was definitely a good job to spend time with them and then get up to suddenly now all the groups are together. Now we'll go back and tell what actually happened with them in that story. I think that was a really good choice, story-wise, to do.
And you talk about foreshadowing. This is something they foreshadowed throughout season 1, where they mentioned the tail section. Everyone just assumed that they died. And at one point, Rose was even saying, when everyone tried to say, "Oh, your husband's dead. You need to accept it and move on." And she's like, "Well, they're probably over there on the other side of the island thinking the same thing about us." And then we see that's actually the case, that they believe that there's no way anyone in the other part of the plane survived.
Oh yeah, the whole Rose, that was one of my favorite bits in one where she's just like, "No, my husband's alive and he's fine, and I'm just going to wait for him to come up." And then when we get, which was an episode or 2 prior to this, when we actually have Bernard introduced, "You know my wife Rose?" It was just, it was like, oh my God, she was right.
Yeah.
There was sort of an emotional satisfaction, I think, that there was one person that just had hope, even more than hope, had belief, and that's paid off here.
Cool. Well, it doesn't seem likely we're going to hit our 2-hour mark, but that's all good. We'll give for as long as it needs to be. Anyway, let's move over to the next episode, which is Collision. And this episode I have mixed feelings about because I think it felt very contrived, the whole. We talked about this killing off Shannon to bring these two groups because they just needed conflict. I think they leaned too much into it, which is why at the time nobody liked Ana Lucia. Although the audience was very much against her, I liked her. I thought she was an interesting character, so I was not on board with all the Ana Lucia hate, but I could understand because they portrayed her, and even leading up to this, she was being like really rude to Sawyer for no good reason, and here she like killed Shannon, had Saeed captive. So I think they leaned too far, and let's create a conflict to bring these two together, and that people would have accepted Ana Lucia more if they hadn't leaned too heavily on this, but you do understand her character more with the flashbacks in this episode, which I think were very powerful about saying a man who shot her. Apparently, she was pregnant and lost the baby, and she goes and kills him for revenge. Like she refuses to press charges so that he'll be let go so that she can kill him. That was a powerful backstory. And it was also really touching. You get the musical montage at the end where all the people come together. Rose Bernard reunited, Son and Jen reunited, and Michael and Vincent are reunited. So it was all very touching. But the true story of the conflict I thought was kind of weak.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, they had set up this big conflict between her and Saeed, and so they just sort of had to play that out and stretch that out as much as they could. I'm right with that, and yeah, they made Ana Lucia as a very antagonistic character, not a villain so much as just an antagonist, just annoying. So yeah, I could totally see where the reaction off of her was not very positive. But yeah, from a backstory standpoint, just that last shot when she pulls the gun was just like, I was pregnant, and just unloads on him. You're suddenly like, I understand. I mean, that with one line, you understood so much more about the character. And I think that was one of the best things. But yeah, the antagonism they set up with the shooting Shannon and then kind of holding Saeed hostage until she could get away. It was so overreactionary, I think. But they gotta have drama, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was a bit contrived. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the next episode, which is What Kate Did, in which we find out what Kate did. So I think this is a good, strong flashback for her. I don't know if we needed to wait a whole season to find out what she actually did. I think they kind of procrastinated. And I get the impression that the writers didn't know until they got to the season what she actually did. But I think it was a good reveal that she ended up killing her stepfather, because I love how they avoided the trope of having the fugitive be innocent. She's not innocent. She actually did it, but they avoid her, the audience looking at her as the villain because she's justified in what she did because it was abusive stepfather, and you still identify with her and her whole backstory in that. So I thought that was really great. Island's story again was kind of a waste of time. She sees a horse in the jungle who was there, and she starts to go crazy. That's a bit silly. But anyway, your thoughts on this, Darrin?
Yeah, pretty much same way. I don't disagree with this. I did like it. Did give us a good, strong motivation for where Kate was coming from, the willingness that far she was going to go to protect people that she loved, and yeah, the fact that she was actually guilty of what she was accused of doing. But then, as usual, once you see the reasons why, you're like, well, yeah, what else are you going to do? The guy deserved to die. I don't think she was very smart in the way that she went around it. She seemed to kind of stopping by mom's afterwards and just be like, you're fine. Here you go. I got to go away for a while. Everything's cool. You just announced that you just were behind all of this. I think she could have probably been, if she wanted to get away, it almost gave me the idea that she didn't want to get away with it. She just wanted to do it, but own that it was her that did it. Yeah. But You know, they played with their backstory. Here they finally have latched onto something, and I think from this now they've got a firmer idea of what to do with the character going forward. You're on.
Okay, sorry about that. Cool. So let's move over to the next episode, which is 23rd Psalm. This is the episode that I've always know this episode's really good, but I always debate just how good it is. Is it good or is it great? Is it awesome? I don't know. Hard to say. It's a very powerful backstory, although I've been told that it's not a very realistic portrayal of Nigeria, but it's still very edgy, and it really fleshes out Mr. Echo because you've known him as this like sort of kindly character. So to get this backstory where he's a warlord, basically a gang leader, and resulted in his brother's death and how that affected him, and he took on the role of the priest. And again, this is great season 2 because it's tying into stuff established in previous season, because we saw the beach plane in earlier season where Boone died, and it's introduced that, hey, this is actually tied into Mr. Echo's backstory. Like, that was great. And so the whole thing of fate coming in, and so it's very touching when he burns the body, and the whole Charlie storyline. I don't want to get into that, but I did think this is a very good episode. Darrin, your thoughts?
Yeah, and I love Mr. Echo. He is a great character. I definitely really enjoyed. So it's about time we got a little bit of backstory. We could see where he was coming from. You know, he was very religious, and then he was pulled away from that world, and then had to re-embrace it after the death of his brother, basically because of his own actions. But again, this is how they're continuing. They outside world really having that connection with the island. The plane that we saw before, that's now Mr. Echo's. The fact it came from across the world and ended up landing here, it's adding this again, not only just the mystery of the island, but there's almost a fate idea involved with this. Is that whatever events are happening on the island, have started a long time ago, and everybody else they're supposed to be here. Whatever is going on is a designed part of their lives. And again, this is just one more extra step in really integrating that storyline.
Yeah, I totally agree. Pretty good episode. All right, so let's get to the next episode, which is The Hunting Party. And this episode, I thought, was kind of a rehash of all the best Cowboys Have Daddy issues, where you got Jack, Locke, and a few others go chase after someone. And this time it's Michael who's run off to look for Walt to the other.
Whoa!
Because he was talking to people on that computer, which I thought was a silly storyline. I mean, it's obvious he's being duped. I mean, come on, he's an idiot for not thinking that. And the episode itself was kind of a wash. What was the flashbacks? The flashbacks were kind of boring, with Jack like having that Italian guy who's trying to perform a miracle and he ends up dying. I like the divorce part of it, where his marriage was falling apart. I think that was a really good portrayal of the divorce, but that wasn't the heart of the flashbacks. It was just the beginning and end. So the rest of the stuff I thought was a waste of time, and the actual story of them just walking in the jungle was kind of just a rehash. But the ending scene where they have Mr. Friendly in the campfire and the others, he's like, I think it's just you're lying, you don't have people here. He's like, that's an interesting theory. Light them up. Such a classic scene. This is like a very eerie scene. Like, that scene saves the episode for me. It was absolutely amazing. Anyway, Darrin, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's another one of those episodes where we get to the final reveal, and that's almost what everything is sort of centered around. And the episode itself was just to maneuver everyone into those positions that they wanted to be in. It was sort of a great reveal. We do get another, second time we get to see our pirate other there. And again, this is one of those where Michael just annoys me. He's pulling everybody in the jungle to go after him. And of course he's going to get caught. Of course he's going to get taken away. But it sets up our conflict, which I think is worthwhile. But yeah, everything else, again, it's another one of those episodes. It just feels like you're trying to get to the end and you're just trying to find a pathway in order to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So in the chat, you're talking about Sawyer when they catch the frog. That's later in season 2. Not there yet. And the actor who played Mr. Echo was Simon Adebisi in Oz. Yep, correct. Just like the actor who played Michael is also in Oz. So that had a lot of Oz actors. Yeah, so that was pretty interesting. Anyway, cool. Let's go ahead and get into the next episode, which is Fire and Water, or Fire. Well, you go first, Darrin. You go first with this episode.
This is they're trying to create some conflict, and I mean it sort of plays itself out later on. But yeah, the whole idea of Charlie having this crazy dream that Aaron's in trouble and he needs to be baptized, and it's one of those where we're just like, Charlie and Claire are too close. We need to split them up. We'll make Charlie go insane, and everyone will think that he's back on heroin again, and we'll add that level of conflict onto stuff. And really, this felt so much like a designed conflict episode where we just want to create issues. I mean, the idea that the island itself is trying to tell a story, is trying to convey an image, that's okay. But the way it was all executed, yeah, this is one of those, especially rewatch. I remember the first time I watched it annoyed me. Rewatching it, I almost fast forwarded through this episode. I was just like, no. Yeah.
Actually, one of the times I was rewatching the show, I did skip this episode because I'm not putting myself through that. But I found I missed a couple of good scenes with like, I think this is one where Sawyer was with Hurley and Hurley's crushing on Libby, and Sawyer like says, "Hey, Libby," and then walks away. So it's just Hurley sitting there waving at her, and he goes, "Hey, yourself." Like, that's cool. So some cool character interactions. Also, you have Jack and Ana Lucia, where Ana Lucia asks Jack about Kate, says, "Are you hitting that?" He's like, "No, I'm not hitting that." Like, that's cool. So you get some cool character interactions in this episode, but the actual story in this episode sucks. It is just so bad, so horrible. Like the Charlie flashbacks, this is even worse. Like in diapers, and oh my god, it's just such a horrendously bad episode. So I'm going to ask you, Darrin, would you say it's fair to say that this is the worst episode of the entire show?
I think it's fair to say that. I think it is. Like you said, there are a couple of interesting moments that kind of like get you through, but for the most part, I can. Yeah, this does, and it does nothing to really convey any actual like storylines outside of just splitting Charlie and Claire up.
Yeah, and I think they just totally fumbled the whole this heroin thing. I think like finding the statues or whatever, like they hinted at the end of season 1, and you thought they were going to go somewhere with it, but they didn't. Anyway, I would say this is the second worst episode of the show. I think the worst episode is season 3, episode 9. I think you know the one I'm talking about. But they're both up there. They're both really bad. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the next episode, which is The Long Con. And I actually really like this episode. I think this is a strong Sawyer episode. I mean, it's kind of funny how he's all worried about getting his stuff back, even though he's been back at the camp for weeks, and all of a sudden he's worried about it. But I like how they established, like, Jack's like, "No, screw you, you don't get the medicine back," and so it's this conflict between Sawyer and Jack, but then it translates into this power struggle that's going on between Jack and Locke, and Sawyer uses that. He does sleight of hand. He uses Kate because he knows that he'd be able to con her into thinking Ana Lucia is the one who wants the guns, when really he's making you play for the guns. And this is perfectly juxtaposed with the flashbacks of him and Cassidy, where you think that he's teaching her how to con, but really she is actually the long con, the long mark. And I think this episode just came together perfectly. I love this episode. Anyway, Darrin, your thoughts?
Yeah, you're right. The way that the fact that they allowed sort of Sawyer to just grab all of his little stash stuff and kind of keep that is one of those that, just from a structure standpoint, I'm kind of always wondering, like, how come everybody else gives up and shares, and there's this one guy that is going around taking stuff, but everyone's still kind of okay with that. There was always one kind of interesting kind of idea with the show. But here, yeah, and you're totally right with the blend of the flashback story into what's going on now, where you find out that he is behind. You think that everything is going one way, and you find out it really is going completely other. That Sawyer is doing the long con. He's long conning the girl in the past. He's long conning everyone up there, and he's using Charlie as kind of the unexpected ally to help do it. Why? Because he wants Locke to be embarrassed, wants him to feel bad. I mean,
that was a good reveal. I think that almost justifies Fire and Water, because Fire and Water did such a bad job at Locke. Locke was totally out of character, turned Locke into an asshole. So by the time we get to this episode and Charlie's like, yeah, I want to get the better of Locke, I'm right there with him. I'm like, yeah, fuck Locke.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's a good thing, but
but yeah, that was sort of a perfect way of bringing that one element forward as a motivation for Charlie. I thought that was great. I love the whole background story where he is conning the girl, but he does kind of fall for her, and you get that final shot where he's like, yeah, that guy's out in the car. You got to get out of here. And he goes out and he sits in the car and it's empty, and he's just counting, and then goes in and pulls out the other case that was right in the chair underneath there. I mean, it was perfect. And why does he do it? Because that's who he is. It was a very strong Sawyer episode right there.
Absolutely.
I mean, you definitely see that he's just trying to make himself the villain in everybody's eyes.
Exactly. It's not necessarily who he is, but he just convinced himself. He's like, I'm not a good person. It's actually a defense mechanism to push people away from him because he has such self-loathing. Such a good portrayal of that. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is one of them. So we start to get more. We see Kate's father in this flashback, and so it's interesting that they hinted at that he fought in Iraq, and we see him there with Saeed and during the Iraq War, and of course we get the what's the guy actor's name? Something Clancy.
Clancy Brown.
Clancy Brown, yeah.
Oh, I love him. Him.
He's such a good actor. And then, of course, he will appear later in the finale in Desmond's flashback. So it was great I love the whole flashback time thing. And the flashbacks themselves were pretty interesting with Saeed learning how to torture. So I don't know if I'd say it was the best, but it was engaging. It was pretty interesting. And of course, we get the introduction of Henry Gale. And since this is just about season 2, we'll call him Henry Gale for the stream. He becomes a classic character. So it was a pretty strong episode. And Saeed goes to beat him up. And Jack has to pull him off. Anyway, your thoughts, Darrin?
Yeah. Michael Emerson is just so amazing. And this is one of those perfect things where this sets up everything else that comes after that into this season. Really, I think is structured really well. I think they do a great job with his introduction and slow reveals. You don't know, is he telling the truth? Is he a liar? Is he one of the others? Is he, you don't know. And I think a lot of that is played into Michael Emerson's role, who, if I remember, was really originally cast for a couple of episodes. Yeah. And one of those where it's just he did such an amazing job. They're like, we're keeping this guy around. We'll figure this all out. And of course, again, we get our introduction of Clancy Brown here, which is perfect for what we see later on. Again, further the ties of the outside world and the island world really intertwining.
Cool. All right, let's go ahead and move over to the next episode then, which is Maternity Leave. This is a favorite of mine. I think this is an underrated episode because this is the Claire episode. I love that we get an adventure, first of all, with Claire Rousseau and Kate, because that's an unusual bunch. I'm sick of seeing Jack, Locke, and Sawyer go off. It was interesting to get a different perspective. And also, I totally bought Claire's motivation. She's a mother trying to protect her son. There's no stronger motivation than that. And how she thinks that Rousseau was working with the others, which is probably pretty stupid of her to think that. But anyway, and then she's found out at the reveal that Rousseau was actually the one that saved her from the others and brought her back to the camp. So it ties everything up in a nice bow from season 1. And plus, when she first came, I noted when she first came back in season 1 from being captured, it looked like she had a massive hangover. And in this episode, she's acting really drugged. And you see Ethan giving her water that tastes funny. And that's how they sort of brainwashed her and explained why she couldn't remember anything from that time. And it was just so great, especially they hint at, you see Mr. Friendly there, and he says, like, Ethan, it wasn't the plan to kidnap her. This is like, and then they deepen the mysteries when they go to the medical station and it's empty. I love it. I think this is one of the first episodes where we get a flashback, and not to before the time of the island, but during this time in season 1, which we didn't see, which I think it was a great precedent. I love this episode. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, again, we're furthering the mysteries. We do get to see, William Epther. We get to see Ethan again, and again playing different. He was so very creepy in season 1 with most of what we saw him in, and here we're really seeing another side, an opening, and accepting, wanting to be supportive. We get the whole, interior of this other hatch. Implying that there's a larger, there's definitely so much more of the Dharma Initiative in interplay here. And of course, we get Kate finding the theatrical makeup and fake beard that Mr. Friendly was wearing, and suddenly going, it's like we've got their costumes up on hangers. It gives that extra element, because now suddenly we're seeing the others not just as, vagabond pirates or whatever, but with fancy equipment and skills and training. So there's so much more to them now than what we might have thought. They're not just a boogeyman. They're part of Dharma, maybe. There's something else going on. Which again just bolsters the whole mystery here.
Yeah. Amazing episode.
And then we get more of the Henry Gale bit, and this is where we saw the introduction of the last one, and here we start to see the little plays where he starts to give the hint. He gives that one final statement to Locke of, why do you let Jack talk to you like that?
Oh god, it's so, yeah,
why do you let him talk to you like that? And it is because you're believing him, and then suddenly with that one final statement, you're like,
it's so
wait
obvious he's a manipulative, little punk there. I think he gave himself away with that. But
that was the total giveaway right there. But
it's a cool line. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is The Whole Truth. Now, this is the episode where Sun finds out she's pregnant. In the flashbacks, we find out that she can't get pregnant, and then we find out it's Jen who actually can't get women pregnant, and I don't like this. I mean, I think it's okay. I don't think it's a bad episode, but I didn't really get into this whole Sun and Jen thing. And it starts with Jen ripping up her garden because he's being overprotective again. I get a bit tired of this storyline. Anyway, your thoughts on this, Darrin?
I'm not too disagreed. There is the really cool point that they did have between Sun and Jin in this episode is at the end when Jin is apologizing, and he kind of opens up and he's like, you're the only person I can talk to here. And it really shows, I think, this sort of isolated feel. I mean, what are we, like 2 months now into being on the island? And you can feel this guy who's very proud, but trapped and has no other connection. And the one thing that he doesn't want to lose is the woman that he loves, even though he's kind of at conflict with her at times. So I really loved that moment. It was such a moment of vulnerability for Jen. And I think I just remember emotionally just being like, wow, imagine being trapped somewhere where you have one person to talk to and everyone else is like, womp, 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 womp. Really, I just thought that was a great emotional moment. And then, of course, we've got the creepy Henry reveal at the end where they finally let him out.
Reveal. Yeah, that was. I remember being so shocked by that. They didn't really go anywhere with it, but it was still very shocking. Where it's like, oh, well, if I were one of them, then I would just draw a map to where my people could ambush Ana Lucia. Hey, you guys got any milk?
I know, God, I love that. I love the milk line. So innocent. What? You know, we're just having a little snack here. No, it was, yeah. That was, again, it's like each of these episodes are given one little thing to just show there's so much more to Henry.
Absolutely. And in the chat, X-Men says Michael Emerson became the star of the show for me almost immediately. His character almost blew everyone else out of the water, and says, I thought no one could match Locke because of how good his character is, but out of nowhere, Emerson steals Locke's #1 spot as the badass. Yeah, and I think it's episodes like scenes like this that really start to build that up. And I can see why the showrunners kept this actor around after.
Yeah, for sure. and it is. And at this point, we're seeing a lot more uncertainty on Locke's part, whereas the mystique he had in season 1 is now really fading away, and he's a lot more of a, pardon the pun, lost character. Whereas Henry is just, you're just feeling he is owning every moment that he is there, and he knows exactly who he is.
Cool. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next episode, which is Lockdown. This is where we get the epic sort of Henry Gale reveal that he is definitely one of the others, because we get Saeed and Emma Lucia coming back from their little tramp or their little hiking trip, and they find out that they find the dead body of Henry Gale. It was so great. And by the way, I like the side plot of Saeed and Emma Lucia sort of going off on their hike and them sort of reconciling. I thought that was a good touching plot, and it was a good conclusion for them to come back and be on the same side. Where Locke, of course, he was trapped in a lockdown, and Henry helps him, so he's all, oh, Henry's a great guy. But then here comes Saeed back. You get the mysterious food drop and the mysterious lockdown and all that. Your thoughts on this episode?
Oh, yeah. Well, in the black light map inside, when the walls come down and suddenly the black light goes on, it's the creepy shot of the map of all the different hatches and things like that in the area. Again, total perfect lost mystery. What the hell is this? You're always questioning, is Henry going to help? Is he going to run? That final reveal when they pull out and he's like, yeah, we found the Dave. And then we dug up the grave, which Henry probably didn't think of, and certainly didn't pull the wallet out of the male body, not the wife that was buried in there. And it's a black guy named Henry. I mean, totally could not have been him in any more of a way. Was just, again, one of those just great moments where you're like, you're not sure. They've suckered you one way and the other, and now it's completely exposed. Especially with the confidence that Saeed had, because the last we saw was they were just looking at the grave going, oh, he's right. And when they return, they're like, oh, you can totally tell they know that he's been lying.
Yeah, and there was a lot, like the map, the food drop. There's a lot of like cool little, mysterious mysteries building in this episode. I think was absolutely great. In the chat, Cardinal Doomsday says that wasn't Henry Gale Dorothy's uncle in The Wizard of Oz? Yes, he was. That's where they got the name. They named the character off of the character from The Wizard of Oz. And why is Locke so stupid in this episode? I don't know if he was that. I think he's just desperate, and he's desperate to believe in the hatch and believe in the island. I was duped by Henry as well in this episode, so I thought it was shocking when it was revealed. But I shouldn't have been duped because he was acting kind of suspicious the whole time. But I think it was a really great episode. And the Locke's flashbacks I think they were somewhat decent, where we find that he loses Helen because he's too obsessed over his father. I think that was pretty powerful as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, no. I'm with you on that. I didn't even make notes about the flashback, though. I guess that's one of those. More Helen and stuff background. Okay.
Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next episode, which is Dave. My brother actually said this is his favorite Hurley episode. I disagree. I like Numbers better. And then I heard recently someone else say that they hated this episode. I'm in between. I don't think this is a really good or really bad episode. I think it's a decent episode. I like how it builds off of the revelation that Henry kills one of the others, and Saeed tries to kill him, and she has to put him out of the room. But then it sort of pivots into her storyline with the food and the mystery. At least this time they're not stupid and don't eat all the food. At least they're smart enough to like divvy it out and make a kitchen with it. But I don't know if I ever liked the reveal that Hurley was hiding the food the whole time, but it's kind of ironic how he destroys all the food and then here's more all of a sudden. I think that was kind of cool. But the whole thing with him seeing the imaginary friend, like, I actually like that. It was kind of decent. I think the flashbacks in the mental institution where you think Dave's is a real person, it's revealed he's not. I think it was pretty strong. And then at the end, Dave tries to convince Hurley that he's the one who's imagining the whole island. And you get, of course, Hurley and Libby hooking up in this episode. But anyway, your thoughts, Darrin?
There was definitely irony with destroying all of your food and then walking around the corner and a whole new giant pallet has just dropped down. However, kind of like you talking about the previous one, when he gives away all the food, everyone should be sick after just living on papayas. That is a massive waste of food. I understand that it's an internal cathartic release moment, but go give it away. Don't waste it all into this. I mean, there's like meals for everyone, at least one or two within all of that for all of the survivors. So that, again, especially rewatching, I'm like, I understand your cathartic moment, but that's a big waste of food.
Just real quick,
yeah.
JC in the chat says Dave has the worst scene. The worst scene in the entire show is Hurley destroying the food.
I'm with you, J. Cameron. It's I completely agree. On the other hand, it has one of the more hilarious scenes when Sawyer pushes Hurley just too much and Hurley jumps him. The whole thing commands, and you see like Sawyer trying to draw himself out and Hurley just pulling him back into the tent. Was just, it was so awesome. It was just hilarity. You could see Sawyer like, I have pushed too far. I am not going to win against this guy. I love that moment. Again, the collapse. I love
how Jen was standing there laughing the whole time.
Oh, I know. Nobody's helping. They're just like,
Son had to nudge Jen to be like, come on, help him. He's like, all right.
All right. But no, that was awesome because they're just like, okay, we're just going to enjoy this show for a little while right there. Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts in that. Again, you have an annoying part with Hurley and a great part with Hurley. I guess it sort of balanced itself out.
Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next episode, which is SOS. Now, this is another episode I think was rated on one of the 5 worst episodes of the series on IMDb. It was one of the 5 or 10 lowest. I didn't think this episode was that bad. I think the island storyline with Bernard trying to build the SOS sign, that was a giant filler waste of time. But I kind of like the backstory with Rose and Bernard. It was really cute, and the fact that it reveals that Rose had this terminal disease the whole time and that she was healed by the island, and she knows that Locke used to be in a wheelchair, so she's aware of what the island can do. Like, that was a cool little scene there, and a big reveal of how and it's kind of important to the mythology, because the scene where they meet the faith healer in Australia, he brings up that there's some magic places of electromagnetism in the world that can heal people. It's obvious that they're implying that the island is definitely one of the biggest ones of that. So I thought it was a decent episode, but the SOS sign was a waste of time. Your thoughts on this episode?
I agree. That final shot where she's sitting on the beach with Locke, and he's just like, Jack says it's gonna take weeks for my leg to grow, but she's like, yeah, but it's not gonna take that long. And we do get the flashback scene in the airport where he grabs the dropped object from her and hands it back, and so she knows that obviously he was in a wheelchair prior to. That whole storyline, again, I wouldn't say it's one of the worst. It's a medium episode. While they want to set Bernard up as this almost annoying, overly obsessive character, that was a bit of it. But on the other hand, simply having somebody having an idea of putting giant letters on the beach in case passing plane or satellite can come by, I appreciated that at least they got that out of the way, because that is something that they should have done maybe more than 2 months into being on the island. That should have been something a little bit quicker. You do the signifier, that doesn't work. Then you do the giant letters. That's survival 101 on Lost Islands.
Yeah, absolutely. And JC in the chat says, I like what they did in this episode. I wish the writing matched the pilot, which clearly implied that Rose and Bernard were married for a long time. And that's what I was thinking. Having them just meet recently does not match up with what was established before.
And this is also where we have Henry further pushing Locke by telling the story that he never pushed the button.
Yeah.
And he just let it go to, and you can see it obviously went to a point, because we did see before the hieroglyphic characters. So there was a lot of validity to how Henry did tell that story, but then pushing on with, you're a lie. I didn't do anything. It just reset all by itself.
Yeah.
What is Henry's goal in that? That's one thing that kind of questioned me.
Yeah, it seemed like Henry was just doing that to fuck with John, because he wanted to keep him off balance, and so he would be more vulnerable. So that's why. But when I first saw it, I knew it was obvious that he was lying, because you hear that all electromagnetism, and they hinted at all that. I knew it wasn't just nothing. So I knew he was full shit. Plus, that wouldn't be very interesting storytelling. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the next episode, which is Two for the Road. Now, I will say, and I stand by this, the ending scene where Michael kills Ana Lucia and kills Libby and then lets Henry Gale go, to me, that is one of the top, most shocking moments in all. I was so blown away by that scene. I was just like, I couldn't believe, what the fuck did I just watch? I would put it right up there with Ned Stark losing his head and Game of Thrones and all the scenes. I think that scene was so shocking. I did not see that coming. I was a bit disappointed that they killed off Ana Lucia and Libby, because these are two characters I wanted to see more of. But I think the scene was worth it, because holy shit, it's not that we loved and cared about Ana Lucia and Libby, it's that Michael did it. And so that and the backstory between this, with Ana Lucia meeting Christian Shepherd in Australia, that was okay. It sort of helped flesh out our character a bit more, I guess. And the Ana story leading up to that, where Ana Lucia wants revenge on Henry Gale, and she realizes that she can't do it. She had character growth. She became such a good person that she couldn't kill him, and because of that, she died. Because of that, she gave the gun to Michael, who killed her. It's such a tragedy. I loved it. Anyway, Darrin, your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely one of the most shocking moments. It is completely unexpected. However, this is one of those interesting things where there's additional story that does and doesn't play into the episode, because when this happened, everybody had the feeling that Ana Lucia and Libby were killed because the two actors got drunk driving tickets previous months in Hawaii. So everyone was like, "Oh, this is what happens." They upset the producers, and that's why they ended up getting killed. Truth in many discussions with the producers afterwards is, no, that wasn't the case. This is always implied. Rodriguez never wanted to be on the show more than a season. And yes, she does finish her character arc in that moment. So it does sort of make sense. Yeah, she becomes somebody that's not after revenge. She can't do this anymore. She just wanted to go home. You can see how the whole arc with the flashback and her current speech to Michael really plays into, she has finished a large character arc, which usually is the sign that you're going to die. Libby, on the other hand, I felt they were still in the midst of telling her story, especially because in the previous episode, they had shown that she was actually in the hospital with Hurley. So it's like we're implying this larger, further story they're going to develop, and then they take her out. That didn't feel very natural. Whereas you could see where Ana Lucia's arc did sort of complete. With Libby, it was like, we're right in the middle of things. On the other hand, Hurley finds love, can't have happiness on the island, must kill girl.
I don't know. Like I do believe. Like I heard that Aunt Lucia, or the actress, signed a contract for only 1 year. So I totally believe that her dying off in this episode was planned. And as you say, it makes sense for the story. Libby, on the other hand, I've heard some convincing arguments that it was her DWI that got her killed off, and I think it makes sense because it's like you say, they were setting her up for more story, and then all of a sudden they kill her off. They officially said, well, it's because we needed someone the audience identified with to make this moment more shocking, because it was just Ana Lucia. The audience didn't really like her very much, so we had to kill. I think that was maybe their justification for getting rid of the actress. I think, and plus I heard that she was hard to get along with, that she had disagreements with the producing and writing staff, so they wanted to get rid of her. And I completely buy it, because I think they just set her up in the previous episode for a long-term story arc, and then all of a sudden she's dead, which I thought was a massive disappointment.
Yeah, and especially the way that it's done. You can get shooting Ana Lucia, she was in there, whereas Libby's just coming out to get some blankets and get shot. She'd already gotten in there, already gotten the blankets, and was coming out before Michael or anybody else realized she was there. I guess she's a ninja, but just she shouldn't have opened her mouth. So yeah, well, I see Michelle Rodriguez's arc, planning to be ended there. Yeah, Libby's did seem like it was in the middle of a story, and they just kind of took her out.
Cool. And X-Men in the chat says a lot of people hated Michael, but I liked him for the shocking scene. It was incredibly iconic and made the season stand out from the rest of the show. It's one of the most memorable scenes. I agree. I never was a Michael hater myself, but I thought this scene in particular is really good. Anyway, let's get into the next episode. I think it's question mark. Yes, question mark, which is a powerful Mr. Echo episode. It's a really good episode. It builds off the Ana Lucia and Libby death. In fact, Libby didn't fully die. She was dying, and Hurley was sort of by her side how she died. It's kind of frustrating too, because she says Michael, and it's obvious she's trying to point out that Michael shot her, and Jack's just like, no, Michael's okay. And it's like, no.
Yeah, somebody's last words are going to be talking about who killed them, not worrying if someone else is okay.
Yeah, so that was a bit frustrating, but it was a good storyline with Mr. Echo. His flashbacks were really interesting. You see Claire's psychic from season 1 again, where it's revealed that he's a fraud, which is really interesting. And also Mr. Echo, actually the thing he's investigating, the girl who practically died, or so-called died, apparently tells her you will see your brother again, and then of course in the island he sees his brother. So it's really fascinating stuff. And of course we get another appearance of Marvel Candle, except he's calling himself Mark Whitman now, and a different Darwin Initiative station, the Pearl, and of course it's funny because they watch the same video, but Locke, after watching the video, is convinced that the hatch is a joke and the button's a joke, but Mr. Echo is convinced it's more important than ever, and so he's going to take over. So I like that this character dynamic, the interplay between these two characters were amazing. A very powerful episode. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, we're really playing on Locke's impending doubt, but they've sort of manifest for the past several episodes. Really sort of manifests itself right around here, and in some ways it's, I don't know, it's funny because it's like they get the stories that you're observing some psychological experiments, and there's obviously multiple monitors with multiple stations, and yet Locke focuses in that his has to be the one that's a complete joke, and he's been wasting his time. So it's like he's almost
never thought of that. Oh, right.
To doubt himself in that sense. Which, again, just, for where they wanted to go with this season, I guess kind of works, but it seems so contrary to how they established Locke previously.
I don't know. Like, when I watch this episode, I'm 100% with Locke on this. I think Mr. Echo is the one who's taking a lead, because it does sound from that video they are specifically saying the whole thing's just a psychological experiment. In fact, I think the Dharma Initiative were careless, since we know the button actually is saving the world, to have a video like that could easily be misinterpreted into thinking that the button's a joke. So I think the Dharma Initiative were very careless with the fate of the entire world, just my opinion.
Sure. But it also, again, it ignores some of the other stuff with the heavy magnetic field that we've already implied, that there's definitely more going on with this hatch, but to just then jump in and be like, oh, it's a complete, waste psychological experiment. It has no other meaning than that. I think ignores some of the previous evidence, which is why I'm saying I think it really just is feeding more into Locke's growing sense of self-doubt, which is why he's more willing to accept it. Whereas Echo is seeing kind of larger pictures and, visions of his dead brother and people's dreams, I guess, kind of plays with that.
Cool. All right, so let's get into the next episode, which is 3 minutes. So this was another great episode, kind of like Maternity Leave, where we don't get flashbacks before the island. We get flashbacks to an earlier part of the show, or what happened to Michael when he was taken by the others, which of course is very pressing after he just killed Anna Lucia and Libby. And I think these flashbacks were and this whole episode I think was very powerful. I like this as a Michael episode. I think it shows his state of mind and just wanting to help Walt, and just how destroyed he was, and how the others broke him down, and how badly he wanted to save his son, and how they got him. Like that scene when he says, "You have 3 minutes," and Walt comes in and is talking to him. And plus it hints at all the greater mysteries involving the others in very exciting and tantalizing ways. I think it was a very powerful episode, and I love the fact that because he's told he has to bring 4 specific people, he has to try to tell Saeed that he's not coming. It has been established in the show, Saeed can tell when someone's lying, when someone's manipulating, and Michael's not even that good of a liar. So it's a drop in the bucket for Saeed to figure out he's been turned by the others. So that was very powerful, and so he tries to come up with a plan to take this to his advantage, which I love. I think it's a great episode. Darrin, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I do like the flashbacks. I like seeing earlier and finding out what had happened during the time we didn't see anything. And yeah, when Walt appears and he goes up to his dad, they're not who they say they are. There's more to them. We're reinforcing what we saw back with the other hatch when Claire went and found the medical thing and found, they found the costumes and the fake beards and stuff like that. This is Walt coming in further supporting that point of view. And yeah, that Saeed is easily able to figure out that Michael has been turned and has been lost, I think is a great, it reinforces his character, and it keeps things from being drawn out too much. I think pacing wise, that's one thing they did really good this season, is they didn't let things dwell for too long. They would hit them and then they would work with them and use those reveals, as opposed to just doing one thing and then waiting multiple episodes before hitting on it again.
Cool. All right. Let's get into the big finale of season 2, Live Together, Die Alone. And I've said before, I don't know if I'll have to finish my rewatch, but I said before that this is the best episode of the show. It's definitely one of my favorites. I think this episode was so powerful on so many levels. Every storyline works. You got Michael leading Jack, Kate, Sawyer, and Hurley into a trap, and like the suspense and build up to that. You got Saeed, Jen, and Son going on the boat to try to ambush the people. You got Locke having the conflict with Mr. Echo and Desmond helping him to take down the button, while at the same time you get the most epic flashbacks of Desmond, a character. Honestly, I thought when I first saw Desmond, they were going to make this character like Rousseau, like he'll be in the jungle and just pop up from now and then. But no, he's off in the boat and comes back with a vengeance. And he says they're on a snow globe. There's no escape from the island. You get his backstory and how he got to the island. You see Clancy Brown again, who's absolutely amazing in this episode. And you get answers about the button, and of course the huge reveal that it was Desmond's failure to push the button that caused the plane crash to begin with, which was so amazing. And plus you get the epic love story of him trying to impress Penny in order, because Penny's father, rich father, doesn't want him to have anything to do with her, and how that leads him to go to the island like this. And the whole episode was just amazing, in my opinion. Darrin, your thoughts?
Yeah. I this is, again, you're setting up for your big season finale, so you're bringing all of this past information in together, and they're doing it perfectly. Clancy Brown, which I always love to see. It's another great, like, hey, now this character from somebody else's life has been here this whole time. The reveal for that it was crashed. The giant bit of statue that we finally see the first of on this.
Oh yes,
with 4 toes. I love that line. I'm not sure what's more disturbing, the fact there's a giant statue there that it only has 4 toes. That's perfect. And then also, so Libby gives Desmond the boat. This is another flashback.
Yeah.
Where did this come from? This is a bit of story we didn't catch any on, but that she is the one. And it's great because Desmond never sees Libby. She doesn't arrive until after he leaves, and she's dead before he comes back. So it's another interplay of somebody that's involved with the island, but that this person never has to interact with. I think is all really interesting. And this is also another one where, again, I love Henry and Cusick, and we'd think that he was going to be part of the show at the beginning of the season, and then he's in for 3 episodes and gone for the entire season until just the very end. So it's like, oh, we like this guy. Let's bring him back. Or was that always the plan? You wonder that because, so much of Lost was made up as they went along, but they also had some good, solid plans. And I think this season being one of those where it seemed like they really knew where they were going from beginning to end.
And I think this is his flashback in this episode is like the best, most epic flashback because it tells a very strong character story from the get-go, a strong romance story, and it builds into him his time on the island, and it fills in some of the mysteries about the button. And it was so great how they tie it to season 1 too, because you get the scene of Locke banging on the hatch. Desmond's perspective that he was about to shoot himself, and Locke basically saved his life by banging on the hatch. But it was so powerful.
Yeah, this episode really was great at bringing all of these elements back together. I think it was beautiful.
Yeah, and that ending scene too was just the first time we saw a perspective in the present time off island, where we see the guys in the Arctic station call up Penny saying, "Oh, we found it." That just blew my mind.
Oh, well, that's 224. Yeah, that's the end right there when everything actually all ends up blowing up, which I thought, again, it was one of those interesting moments. It was like, well, didn't Henry Gale know this was going to happen? How much is he involved in this? It brings up so many interesting questions in with that. It's another great way of ending it. Plus, we got the shot in the last one where all of the pneumatic tube messages have just been being dropped into this pile in the middle of the island. But the group comes up against it just before they're attacked by the others, and they see all of the pile of paperwork. Somebody's been making all of these notes. I mean, that was
that was really good stuff.
That's that creepy level of just pointless. How long have people been doing this? And what was it that Echo or Desmond that had said, maybe you're mistaken. Maybe the other thing was the psychological experiment, and this was the important.
I think it was Desmond who said that.
Yeah.
Desmond said that after Locke told him about that. Yeah, definitely good stuff. It's interesting in the chat. JC says in Orientation they showed a picture of Penny, but it was a different actress. Only aired in that first airing. It was edited on DVD. That's interesting. I didn't notice that.
Good call there, J. Caven. That's nice.
Yeah, cool. So anyway, now we've covered all the episodes of season 1 and 2, so we're going to get into our spoiler section. So anyone watching this currently, if you haven't seen up to the very end of Lost season 6, the very last episode, you will want to jump out of this stream now. Stop the video now. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this, and we hope to see you more in the future for more Lost videos. Okay, so I'll give you spoilers will begin in 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so let's go full on spoilers now. There's a couple things you just talked on, Darrin, that I wanted to talk about regarding spoilers, particularly with Henry Gale not knowing about this is something I've actually sort of thought about a lot, and the impression I got from later seasons is that the others were not aware of the Swan Hatch, they never knew of its existence, because in season 5, when you see that Rosinski and the others are building this hatch in secret, like it's in the others' territory, and so they have to be secret about it. It's not on any official maps and stuff. And I think the producers themselves confirmed that the others were unaware of the Swan hatch, so that's why they were just as shocked as anyone else about the sky turning purple and all that, because they're completely unaware of any of it.
Okay, and that makes sense.
Yeah. And that also gets in the whole thing about how I personally think, I think it's implied that, and this is getting to season 3 storylines of, the babies women not being able to give birth, pregnant women die on the island. I think it's implied that, because we see in the 70s that someone gives birth to Ethan, but that's before the incident.
The incident, so I think, changes everything.
Yeah. I think the incident made pregnant women die, and so after this point, women could give birth on this island too, once Desmond turned the failsafe key.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that was a great way of ending this too. Is you never see what happens to Desmond, Locke, and Echo. You expect that they're all dead. We even have when Charlie gets back, he's like, they're not back yet. But I think it's sort of an interesting way to sort of leave that storyline of what does happen to everyone. And again, it's a season finale, so I think it's a great way to leave those questions laying out there. The other one that I wanted to hit on is I know how everything, ends up ending. And I'm jumping into season 6 spoilers right here, the end of the show, everyone. So just heads up warning. There's the idea that they were dead the whole time, which isn't actually the case. It was, just an important part of their life. And then the whole ending sequence is all like the middle road before they go on to whatever is next. And they're reflecting on everything that's happening. But I think they play a lot with those ideas, especially in the first couple, in the first season or two of, are people dead or are they alive? Is this imagining or is this something else? Because when they have all of the ghosts appear, the visions, whether it be Jack's father or Dave or anybody else, where is this coming from? I think even some of the characters have asked, like, how is it possible that we all landed without almost any injuries, and everybody else is here? So it's interesting just how they sort of played with a lot of ideas in the beginning of what is the island and what does it allow you to do, and then when you eventually reveal that it's this, grand battle of good versus evil, these ancient beings that have been summoning people on the island, discover stuff. It's interesting how they played with a lot of these concepts and ideas. And as we know, they were making up a bunch of this stuff as they went along.
Oh, absolutely.
Storylines and questions that never end up getting answered, which is why there was that whole break in the middle there, and then they had to just go in and sort of wrap things up. Yeah. I think they do imply some of these ideas they eventually end up working with early on, and I think it's just sort of interesting to see back how many little Easter eggs and arrow signs that they had sort of put in there that did end up really paying off by the end of the series.
I mean, going through the show, though, I do get the strong impression that they have even had a plan planned out. It was very vague, and I think they changed course a lot, particularly in the final seasons, which is part of the reason why I don't like them very much, because I think they couldn't stick to their plan and stuff. So I think a lot of the things that do match up are sort of incidental, weren't necessarily planned for, but more of they looked back on it and say, like, hey, let's do this with this thing we set up earlier on.
Well, yeah, at the very least, they went and realized there was some stuff they could tie back in and use it. But they played it with enough, general ideas, I think, that allowed them to do that.
I get a question from the chat. JC says, do you think Hurley was hallucinating in season 4 with Echo and Charlie and Ana Lucia, or do you think it was really them? I think it was hallucination until Jacob touched Hurley. Then he had the power. I don't know. I think that Hurley was actually seeing them, or at least that was the writer's intention. I don't really know the reasoning behind this, because honestly, I don't think there was a reasoning. It was just the island gave him special powers. It's something I don't think they smoothed out very well, but I think the intention was that he was actually seeing them.
Yeah, X-Men's asking, since we're on spoiler section, I assume that Walt's special powers had something to do with electromagnetism. It was just a theory, however. I don't know, perhaps. I always just thought that he was just kind of this gifted psychic type character. At least that's what they implied. But I also think I think Walt was one of those where they had some ideas and they just kept developing it as time went on, and maybe weren't particularly specific or consistent, rather.
Yeah, I see. Apparently, birds. It's what they're laying off at a very I have the a mystery that they left hanging. It didn't satisfy to my satisfaction, particularly when we talked about the episode Abandoned where Walt appeared being wet. Why? I mean, why would he do that? I think I've heard some theories on why he would do that, but to me, it just seems like plot convenience because they wanted Shannon to die.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's, I mean, the whole appearance and backward talking kind of thing. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that they've, Walt was just kind of mystery kid. They're like, oh, he's got some connection and he has some power things, and they weren't really sure further along of what they were going to do with that. I mean, that's always how it felt to me. It was like Walt was an idea they didn't know what to do with afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's definitely something we can get into in the later seasons. One other thing I wanted to touch on was that final sequence of "Live Together, Die Alone," where we see the other dudes in the Arctic station with Penny. I love that scene to death, but I don't think they ever followed up on it properly because a lot of things were implied with that scene that Penny knew about the electromagnetism of the island, that she knew that Desmond was there. They said that we found it. So they're obviously talking about the Purple Sky event. Why was she looking for it? How did she know Desmond was on the island? And they just totally abandoned this, and that really upsets me, actually. I think it would have been really interesting to explore this storyline.
Yeah, again, I had just rewatched it, and so yeah, that was one of those. It was one of those scenes that I'd completely forgot about. I mean, I sort of remembered the call to Penny, that there was something implied right there, but yeah, it was definitely one of those where it was like, wait, did they ever touch on any of this stuff again? I mean, I know they bring the Whitmans in, the dad comes in, and there's the whole actual storyline that goes on. But yeah, the guys in the Arctic and all that, I'm like, what is that? They never ever come back to this again. Yeah. What is going on here? So yeah, it's like you have an idea, and then you decide like halfway through the summer, no, we're going to drop that. We're going to go in a different direction.
And the other thing I want to touch on quickly is the numbers, because I think they really bungled this one. I mean, sure, we did see the numbers in Jacob's Cave with the candidates, but they tried to kind of imply, I think the writers at one point even said that Hurley, that the numbers didn't actually cause bad luck and was all in Hurley's head. I'm sorry, that's bullshit. That is not what we saw in the episode. We saw clearly the numbers caused bad luck.
Yeah, it's the numbers. I mean, that was the biggest thing in the first season or two of Lost, is the numbers. What are the numbers? Everybody knew what the numbers. They were playing the numbers as their own lotteries, which, by the way, never played the numbers for a lottery because there's like 1,000 other people that are playing those same numbers every week. But yeah, it's one of those where, again, you have an idea and they take it somewhere, and then eventually they just sort of falls to the side as they started to focus on everything else. And yeah, at the end season, they're like, oh, we got to bring this back. We got to explain this. It's the people that were coming for Jacob. We'll scratch this on the wall and say these are the last.
Yeah.
But yeah, they really did imply that there was a power. It drove the one guy, it drove Hurley's buddy mad. It caused him bad luck. There was so much in these first two seasons of what they give to the power of the numbers. And then it just sort of like, no, it's just etched there. They're just numbers.
Cool. Anyway, that tied into what Shifty was saying in the chat. Says it's hard to stay into a show when you know they're just winging it. Those maddening cliffhanger endings are the only thing keep me interested, but it was mostly frustrating. by the end, I was just stressed. And I can understand that. I've heard the other perspective that how could you go back and enjoy the first couple seasons of Lost when you know the ending is so bad? I think I can divorce myself from it because these it is setting up for a lot of things that they didn't necessarily end in the most satisfying way, and they were just making up a lot of it going along. It is disappointing knowing that, and some of it is frustrating, but I still recognize, even though you still have great character development, you still have a lot of great moments. So I still enjoy the show a lot, and I still think it's one of the best shows, even though they couldn't quite hit that, hit the ending, and it had a lot to do with the fact that they were making a lot of it up as they went along.
Well, it's about the journey, not the destination. It's usually it is, but no, it is one of those I think you can kind of divorce from that because again, especially I hadn't seen it for a while, so I've been doing the rewatch the past couple of months. There really is something kind of magical about how this show established. In fact, it's one thing where I've been kind of like, wow, there should be another. It's almost been long enough. You could do almost another show like this. But the whole concept of being lost on a mysterious island with mysterious things, there is something really intriguing about that. And again, how they set it up with that, just throwing them onto the island and they've got to sort of figure things out in the first bit. And it's all about survival and then discovering all of these other things. There's a great mystery to the show that I think you can still enjoy and divorce yourself from where it goes on, because once it kind of goes off rails, then that's what happens with shows. But I think the quality of the first few seasons is enough for it to stand really on its own and something that can still be jumped in and enjoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. On that note, we'll go ahead and end this discussion now. I'm going to thank you so much, Darrin, for joining me to talk about Lost first two seasons. Absolutely great to talk about these first. Oh, have you lost me? Can you hear me now? You lost me a bit?
Yeah.
Back?
Okay, I got you.
Cool. Great. Yeah, no, so thanks for joining. It was great to talk about these 2 seasons of Lost. It's great. Thanks for everyone in the chat, everyone watching, joining. The idea is as I continue to go through the seasons, that hopefully after I get through season 4 in a couple of months, that maybe you'll join me here again so we can go through season 3 and 4 together.
Yeah, that sounds like a blast. I would love to do that. Again, I'm enjoying jumping back into the series and appreciating really where it did. And when it does, like I said, when it starts to go off the rails, then there's still an enjoyment of that discussion too, of like, oh my God, how did they ruin these great cuts?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been a blast rewatching the show and really enjoying the mystery again. So I would love to do that.
Cool. And hopefully the video could be shorter because season 4 is a bit shorter, so there won't be as many episodes.
The episode count gets a lot tighter going forward.
Yeah. Cool. Anyway, thank you so much for joining, Darrin. Thanks everyone in the chat for joining, anyone watching this in the archives. Thank you so much. Be sure to check out me, Mark, Enchantment Maternity, as I continue to cover Lost. I also cover other shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, and Darrin. Be sure to check him out. Darrin, give a shout out to what's going on with you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us and watching us chat about this awesome show. You can catch me here on YouTube. I'm on D's Reviews. I'm in the middle of Gifted right now. We've got Walking Dead season 9 continuing next month, American Gods season 2 starting in March, and of course, I'm sure Mark is equally as excited, Game of Thrones returning in April for the final season. So yeah, a lot of stuff put out.
Maybe not quite excited.
Okay, I'm excited. I'm excited. Mark's willing to continue forward. You can always catch me with those reviews. And that's it. And on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at DARRINJAQUES. Pronounced Jakes.
Cool. All right. Thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you next time.